Yes, Convener, as previously intimated by the Chief Executive, the Provost and Depute Provost, and also Councillor Cheap.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, we need to hear them verbally, and may I remind you as well to fill in the form, the electronic form, and get these in ASAP. Any declarations of interest?
Councillor Bell and Councillor Duff are indicating they do, and Councillor Boyd is raising his hand.
Councillor Bell, what was that? Councillor Bell, Councillor Duff,
and Councillor Boyd.
Councillor Boyd. Councillor Bell first, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 9, report 19120. I'm an elected member on the board of Voluntary Action Angus, and I've already submitted my paperwork for this. It's a general dispensation, so I'll stay in for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Chair. I'm declaring an interest in item 10, that's report 19220. I'm a council appointed director of MGLL. I was involved in working out the new governance structure. So as a consequence, I am going to declare an interest and step out of the meeting for item 10.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Boyd.
Ditto.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Okay, I'll move on. I just like to advise members that there has been a request for a deputation. That deputation is Daniela. She is a MSYP for South Angus. It's in relation to item 4.2. And I'm going to ask if the council wish to hear the deputation. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
May I also say this is probably one of the first times we've had an MSYP. It's very, very welcome. So Daniela, I'm going to ask you, if you wish to, you have 10 minutes, and if you wish to start your deputation.
I'm just going to let her in for you now. She's got to come into the meeting, sorry.
Okay, right, okay, we'll just leave that for a night until Daniela comes in.
David?
Yeah.
Can I come for 1 second?
Yes.
Can members please make sure they're on mute? A number of people are not muted. It's just in case in the middle of the deputation we've got a bit of noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot.
Leader, can I declare an interest as well, please?
You certainly can, Tommy.
Yeah, it's item number 10, report 19220. I have had various communications with members of MGLL, including the secretary, but I'm happy to remain in the room, so to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Convener, Councillor Wan had his hand up at one moment just a minute ago. I wondered if no. Okay.
Councillor Wan. Seems he doesn't. You can just let me know when Danielle is in.
He's in now.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Daniela. Right. Thank you very much for coming along today. This is, I believe, one of the or perhaps the first for an MSYP speaking in front of the council. So it's very, very welcome. And if you wish to start your deputation, there may be questions after, Daniela, but I'll let you go. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Daniela Fako-Damti, and I am an MSYP for Angus South. I'm also a Black woman, and this is an experience I believe that very few of you will share or have lived through. In the past few months, as a Black woman, my community has been through experiences that are both painful and tragic. The death of George Floyd has deeply saddened us, not because it happened to him, but because it has happened and been happening to many Black women, men, and children all across the group. The deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Tatiana Jefferson in a time when we're already in pandemic has deeply shook us and left us contemplating emotions and our place in the societies in which we live in. Now, these names are names of Americans, and so you may ask, why does Daniela, who lives in Scotland, why is she moved? Why is she affected by the deaths of these men and women who she did not know? I share one thing in common with these men and women, that I am also Black. And the idea that these people were murdered or discriminated against based on their skin color is deeply sickening. Police brutality and racism is not just an epidemic that is sweeping America. Here in the United Kingdom, Rashana Charles, McDuggan, Edon DaCosta, Adriana MacDonald, and Trevor Smith are few of the people who have suffered at the hands of British police and been killed or murdered for the color of their skin. Here in Scotland, the death of Sheku Bayo in 2015, who passed away while he was being restrained, is being brought back to light. And this is great cause for worry. The deaths of these individuals reignited the movement, Black Lives Matter. People may ask why this organization may need to exist, why the emphasis on Black lives mattering. Surely we all matter. Surely we should all be treated the same and respected. Well, the slogan All Lives Matter was not created somehow to unify everyone. It was created as a direct response to dismiss and deny that racism exists. It was created to silence the protesters and the families of these victims of police brutality. It is a disingenuous retort that aims to misunderstand the issues that Black people and protesters are bringing to the attention of white people. But of course, you may ask, to me personally, why Black Lives Matter. As someone who is in the arts, I am fully aware that discrimination happens across sectors in terms of education, health, here in Scotland and abroad. Black women are most likely to die in childbirth than white women. And at every social conceivable economic level, we are being discriminated against. While Black Lives Matter is a movement, it is not just a slogan or an idea. Black lives are actual people who live in Scotland and who want to be accepted and be known. To support Black Lives Matter does not make you anti-white. It doesn't mean that Black people are out for revenge or Black people are out to do harm. We simply want to be recognized, seen, and accepted in the societies for which we live in. Racism is not just found in people. It is found in structures and institutions that constantly push the idea of whiteness, of it being superior, of it being better, which enables white privilege. What is white privilege? White privilege is a societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in societies, particularly if they are otherwise under some social, political, or economic circumstances. And these are deeply rooted in European colonization and the Atlantic slave trade, for which Britain and countries in the entire world have benefited from for years. These include affirmations of one's worth is presumed to be greater and that social status is given to them in terms of freedom to move, to buy, to work, and play freely. These are freedoms that some Black people and most Black people have not enjoyed. In the case of Tamir Rice, who was shot in America for playing with a toy gun. So why am I speaking to you today? I would hope that your council would recognize that Black lives are important, and it is important to emphasize that. As protests across the country, including in Dundee and here in Glasgow, where I currently am, I have seen as people have shared their experiences, painful ones. This week, I have been speaking to 4 young people in my constituency, one of who is of Arab descent. She spoke of being labeled a terrorist, of being called that by her classmates in their school. She spoke of being made to be the voice of every Arab person, which should never be the responsibility of people of color. I spoke to another young lady who is of Nigerian descent. She spoke of her mother being the only and first senior Black nurse in Nine Wells Hospital. She spoke of feeling at a very young age, in primary 1, that if she could be whiter, if she could be paler, then she would be prettier, she would be smarter, she would have more friends. These feelings are not made up, that they are real experiences of young people in Scotland all across. I personally can attest to being in a classroom and the lights being turned off and everyone turning around to laugh and say I had disappeared, that I should smile, and because my teeth were white, then they would see me. These maybe seem as jokes that happen in school and they are passed off as instances of silliness, but they progress on. And if they are not educated and the people are not spoken to about these behaviors, they continue and they are deeply affected. It's time that we call for diversity and inclusion as we move forward. This means that many white people will have to educate themselves on their privilege and their race and some of the things that they've done in the past that may be racist and correct them. It's time to move from not saying the phrase, "Oh, I'm not a racist." Saying I'm not a racist implies a neutrality. It allows you to be safe and to have your own opinions. But being an anti-racist means that you are actively against racism. You are actively against the police brutality and the racism that Black people face all across Scotland. And so many Black people, as they've come forward to share their stories, have also spoke of being gaslighted. Gaslighting looks like phrases like these. "Oh, that can't be the case. Oh, it's not true. Oh, they didn't mean it that way." Where Black people are told that their experiences are invalid, they are told that it is just a misunderstanding, and they are told to let it go. Well, some of these statements carry and live with you for life. I personally moved to Scotland when I was 12 years old, and I went to Knightswood Secondary School here in Glasgow. And one day we were coming down from gym class, and one of my classmates felt that I had cheated her in a turn, and so she turned to me and said, "Maybe if your mom had enough money, you could buy some soap and you could scrub your sin off and you wouldn't be so black, you wouldn't be so dirty." This phrase has lived with me since I was 12 years old. And it's a phrase that saddens my heart because at 12 years old, this young person was taught how to hate. And I believe that as humans, if we can be taught how to hate, then we can be taught how to learn and to be more accepting. I want to challenge this council to make sure that in your schools, the Black history, Black British history is not being erased, that the voices of Black people here in Scotland and abroad in the world is known and taught, and that these issues are brought to the forefront so young people are actively involved in making sure that they are not contributing to a more toxic society. I can say personally for me in this time that I have gone through different emotions, whether I have been saddened or I have been hurt or angry at society. But in no way do we mean to cause anybody harm. These protests are not a way of calling people out or cancelling them. We want to be Black and Scottish because we are proud to be from Scotland. We want to call this home. We've lived here, we've grown up here, we've studied here.
Diana, can I just say you've got 1 minute left?
Yes. Moving forward, we'd like to see a society that is anti-racist. We'd like to see a society in which we are all treated equally and not judged based on the colour of our skin. Thank you.
Daniela, thank you very much for that. That was a very passionate presentation. What I'm going to do now is ask the members if they have, and it will be questions only, not comments, please. Any questions for Daniela?
Councillors Laurie and Bell are indicating they wish to speak, convener.
Sorry, Donald, I missed that. Councillor Laurie, Councillor Bell, Councillor Vaughan, I have. Councillor Laurie first, please.
Thanks, convener. Daniela, what an amazing speech. Thank you for coming in to talk to us today. You are certainly a very powerful speaker. I'm a firm believer in the principle of nothing about us without us. So your contribution has been extremely valuable, especially considering your unique position as a local elected representative of young people. My question is, how can we as a council do better in engaging with our Black communities and being truly reflective of their views and needs?
I believe one of the ways that you can be working better as a council is to include more Black voices in your spaces when talking about anything, including the council, to make sure that it is not completely white people in the room, to reach out and find out in your individual districts who the Black people in your community are, and actually speaking to them and beginning to have conversations about race, and removing the uncomfortability or the squeamishness that comes when people want to talk about race. It seems, especially in Britain and in Scotland, that race is an issue that most people want to sweep underneath the rug. And so it's about making and creating spaces where we can openly talk about this. And so Black people in your communities can share their experiences, not just on matters of race, but on anything to do with council business, making sure that it's not just the opinion of your white constituents that are being heard, but the opinion of all the people of colour in your different communities. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener, and Danielle, thank you so much for that. I had come into this meeting today prepared to tackle many of the issues that you've raised, and there's so much more powerful coming from you, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I was going to ask broadly similar to Ben, but it's much broader than the council. There's our health services, you touched on those, and our police services, who in our last scrutiny and audit meeting, when they were they're telling us about their performance, that they wanted to engage with more diverse communities across the whole of Scotland, actually. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about, if any of that is happening already, how effective is it, and where could we do better? Because, you know, we need to look at the whole picture here. It's not just about the council, it's about all of our civic society. And we all need to collectively recognise that we're not immune to racism in this country as much as we'd like to think so, but we all need to be part of the solution. And I would really welcome your insight into how best we do that and how well it's working so far, and what are your ideas for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Currently, most brands and organizations are putting together what they call an anti-racism plan. It's where they get a group of experts in each field, and they sit down to discuss specifically issues about racial discrimination and how they can be made better. So for example, in the health service, I would like to see hospitals and GP practices make together their anti-racism plans that focus on discussing issues such as Black mothers not being believed. I said in my speech that Black mothers were 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. This is because nurses sometimes don't believe that Black women are in pain. There are studies upon studies dating back to colonial history where people have come up with reports to say that Black people don't feel pain. And this has been entrenched in the medical system to the point where people are being believed, they aren't being treated, they're being ignored. And so I would like to see instances of that, of people coming together with anti-racism plan and speaking to their patients who are Black and saying, look, what is it that we're doing or not doing? Sometimes when it comes to racism, it's not exactly about something that you've done, it's about what you're not doing, or services that you're providing to white people that aren't being provided to people of color. And in terms of, you mentioned health and the police service, I would say that there needs to be a rebranding of the police services. Many Black people do not feel comfortable calling the police, even here in Scotland, because they believe that they won't be believed. Many people are apprehensive. People have been stopped. I have an uncle who is a lawyer, who is a doctor, and he has encountered the police where they have stopped him because he's driving a nice car and they don't believe that the car is his. He is a doctor. He works in one of the hospitals here in Glasgow, and he has had patients refuse. They said, oh, I don't want a Black doctor, I want a white doctor. This is someone who is the top of his field and in the senior management position. And so racism doesn't know class. It doesn't matter how successful a Black person is. It doesn't matter how ahead they get in life, they will still experience racism. And so I would like to see the police force and Scotland as a whole really
Oh dear. Angus Council, do we have a problem?
I have a feeling she's lost connection because her screen's just frozen. So I would imagine she's lost connection at her end.
Thank you. Can we see if we can get her back?
speech is still showing us actually in the meeting.
Well, this is such a shame.
That's her coming back, and I will just readmit her again.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, John.
I am so very sorry I dropped from the call.
Don't worry, Daniela. We're enjoying your answer there. Right, but now on you go.
Yes, so I would like to see them work on each department, each of the services, work on an anti-racism plan in direct discussion with Black people and people of color. I think that's a great place to start. Start by listening and having a conversation.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor 1, please?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Daniela. Can I just echo what Councillor Laurie and Councillor Bell has just said? Thanks very much for coming along today. I don't actually have a question for you. It's more just in my position as convener of Children in Learning. I'm extremely pleased to hear from you today. It's very encouraging that young people are actively engaging in the democratic process here in Angus and are bringing forward to the attention of the Council the issues that are of importance to them. Along with our community planning partners, we have endorsed the Angus Youth Engagement Strategy and Daniela's request for deputation as an opportunity for this Council to visibly support the principles in the strategy and our commitment to engage with, listen to and involve our young people in decisions and matters that affect them. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor 1.
Councillor Hans.
Thank you. Daniela, what a fantastic presentation. It was really good to hear it firsthand from yourself. I was really pleased that you mentioned and described the issue of gaslighting so eloquently. And I know you've just mentioned about you're drawing together action plans and you're hoping that councils will take them on board along with other public bodies. If you had to prioritise 3 areas, do you have any idea what these 3 main areas would be?
Education in primary and secondary school, firstly, because the racism is learned. It is not, you're not born racist, it's a learned behavior. And so if we can encourage young people and if we can contradict some of the age-old myths and norms in schools by empowering teachers to teach a curriculum that is more diverse, that we can move towards a more anti-racist society. Secondly, it would be healthcare. And thirdly, it would be the police services. And also, I know you said 3, but also politics. Black voices are currently not represented in the Scottish Parliament, and it's very limited also in Westminster as well. So encouraging Black people to be representatives and knowing that they can win even as a Black candidate here in Scotland is very important, both at the local level and on the national level as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Daniela, thank you very much. I'd like to just follow on from what you've said, because councils and organisations get criticised for not having enough BME people involved. But how can we engage with and encourage Black and minority ethnics to come forward and get involved? Because this was what I've learned over the last 15 years, that we are criticised for not involving them, but they aren't coming forward. How do we engage people? How do we bring them in? Because we're not going to win the fight until we get the right people there.
I think it's actively seeking them out. So I would pose a question to some of the councillors on here. How many of your constituents do you know who are Black? Do you know them personally? Have you spoken with them? How much dialogue have you had with them? I think there is a great onus on Black people to step up and fight for their own battles, but it can be done alone. So it involves councils and councillors reaching out to the Black people in your area and actually seeking to find out who they are, because you might think that you may not have any and you may be surprised. There is also much work to be done in terms of electability. Many Black people won't come forward and run because they don't believe that the society society is progressive enough to elect them based on the color of their skin. So I believe that it starts with councillors and councils actively saying and advertising and saying that we would like a more diverse voice. And so actively going to them rather than expecting them to come to you, because as you know, Britain has a long history. And for many people, we are only 3 generations removed from slaves being owned in Britain, only 3 generations removed. And so that's just a very real experience for people whose grandparents worked on plantation fields in Jamaica, who were Caribbeans, who were brought over after World War II. And so those experiences pass down and they are told. And so it's very much the responsibility of councils and governing bodies to reach out to people who they feel would be good candidates and just to invite them into the process.
Thank you.
Councillor Sturrock.
Oh, that's me unmuted now. Yeah, thank you, Danielle. That was a powerful speech, and I agree with everybody's comments on racism that should have no place in modern society. But I do feel that some of the things that you're saying were a bit pejorative and over wide of the mark. And I don't think I've got the time and the space at the present time to go over all of them. And I would be willing to actually meet with you in person to go over this so I can understand fully over a period of time the arguments that you're putting forward.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah, okay, we can meet sometime, arrange a meeting, and we'll discuss this further, Daniele, okay?
Yes, I'm absolutely happy to have a conversation.
Okay, right, thank you for that. I have Councillor Miles.
Yes, again, like others have said, thank you, Danielle. Very powerful speech there. I'm very against any sort of prejudices at all times, and saddened and disgusted to hear the experiences you had and are maybe still having because of race. But what I'd like to see is all, both races, nationalities and religious beliefs are all encompassed. Is there any way it can be widened to encompass all different creeds, nationalities and others as well? Because we're seeing prejudice in all streams, not just for black, but how can we encompass that without diminishing what you're trying to do?
Yes, this goes back to the statement I made about all lives matter and why minorities don't like to be grouped. BAME, some people may disagree with that term actually because we're not all the same. We don't all have the same experiences and they may differ. So I understand many people would like to see a unified front from all ethnic minorities, but it's not actually always helpful. And the reason why Black voices are currently being amplified is because at the present moment, the climate that we live in is directly affecting Black lives in a ways that other minorities and groups are not being affected. For example, the portrayal of Asian communities. They are often seen to be the model minority, often to see people who came and were successful, and they don't suffer the same kind of prejudice or racism or to the level in terms of historical and present day that Black people do. And so while it may be good intentioned to want to group all these minorities together, I think that speaking to them individually and knowing friends from different minorities, the idea of, I would never understand what it means to be an Arab person and being told that I'm a terrorist. I've never known that experience. And so that is a directly different experience. And so each community needs to be giving their voice. So not just engaging with Black people, but yes, you should be engaging with multiple people from different backgrounds, but making sure that you're not grouping them together and sort of lumping them as a problem all on their own.
My point really was rather than lump them together, make everyone be treated equally so that there's no minority groups as such. Everyone should be treated the same, no matter what creed, colour, nationality or whatever. And how we can do that, I'm not too sure, because I do believe all lives matter, everyone matters. And I don't want to diminish your what you're trying to do here, because I recognise where it's coming from and where there's definitely more racial prejudice in some areas than others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for Daniela? No. Well, Danielle, right, would you just stay with us just for a moment? What I'm going to ask next is, before we move on to any further council business, can I ask that Councillor Laurie's motion now be heard? Is that agreed? I don't hear any dissents there, so I'm going to.
Agreed.
Good. Thank you. I'm also going to ask Councillor Laurie to intimate the motion has been amended, and it is not the motion as published. Can I ask that Councillor Laurie confirms that is the case?
Yep, convener. I'll just clarify that I will be speaking to the revised motion that was circulated to members today, and not the original motion published with the council papers. And I'll touch on the additions to the motion in my opening comments.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, for that. Can I also ask then that the council agree Councillor Laurie's amended motion? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
That is super. And Daniela, I'd like to ask you if you wish to remain in the meeting, to hear the debate, and if you wish to stay for other items on business, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. It would be my pleasure to stay. Actually, I would like to stay. So thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to the motion from Councillor Laurie. It's number. It's on page 3. It's number 3, racial equality. Councillor Laurie, if you wish to speak to your motion, please.
Yep, thank you, convener. Members will by now be very familiar with the case of George Floyd, who was killed while being arrested over a counterfeit $20 bill. While this happened in the United States, it sparked protests not just in America but here in the UK as well. Colleagues, while the death of George Floyd may seem like a distant event, it presents to us an opportunity to reflect on the inequalities that Black people experience in our own communities, and to start what can sometimes be uncomfortable discussions, and to listen in good faith to the challenges that are still faced. I attended 2 of the non-violent, socially distanced demonstrations that took place in Dundee, and I listened to the very moving testaments given by the speakers involved. Whilst people had been spurred to action by the death of George Floyd, the name being spoken at these protests, the name written on t-shirts and placards, was Sheku Bayo. 5 years ago, Sheku Bayo died in Kirkcaldy after being restrained by police officers. His family were never satisfied with the subsequent investigation, and after 5 years of campaigning, they've successfully secured a public inquiry into his death. An inquiry that will also examine whether his actual or perceived race had played any part in events. This motion notes that promised inquiry and requests details from the Scottish Justice Secretary of any proposed legislation that the Scottish Government intends to introduce once the results of this inquiry are known. But there's also a wider purpose to this motion. This motion is an acknowledgement to our Black communities that we have heard them. We recognise that the fight for equality is by no means over yet, and that people are still experiencing both overt and institutional racism in their day-to-day lives. Racism is the most common hate crime committed in the UK, but even if every racist person were to simply disappear, racism and bias would still exist in our institutions. For example, we live in a country where Black people are 40 times more likely to be stopped and searched. Black women are 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy than white women, and Black people are 4 times as likely to die from COVID-19. That doesn't sound like equality to me. Finally, I'll address the last 3 points of the motion, although I'm sure the Leader of the Opposition will go into them in more depth. These were put to me by the Leader of the Opposition yesterday, and I was very happy to include them. It was a very last-minute change, so I do apologise that members haven't had as much time to consider them, but I do believe that they strengthen this motion, and I'd like to give my genuine thanks to members of the opposition for their valuable contributions. To conclude, we know that all lives should matter, but the reality is that all lives don't matter until Black lives matter too. Let's pass this motion and have Angus Council play its own part in fostering an equal society.
Thank you very much, Councillor Laurie. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Laurie?
Yeah, I'm going to second that. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. On you go.
Thank you. Just to say thanks again to Danielle, and in my role as a quality spokesperson, can I give assurances to Danielle and indeed this council that I regularly reach out to everyone within our communities, especially those with protected characteristics. And in the last couple of weeks, have reached out to Black friends to hear their views and experiences. It's beyond comprehension that we are here today in 2020, having to advocate and promote equality of any kind. However, the stark reality is that many live within society still subject to discrimination and prejudiced attitudes that my colleague Councillor Laurie has detailed. The impact and effects often result in sheer devastation, with life not only torn apart, but as has been described, sadly lost. Fortunately in Angus, we do not experience this as widely as in other areas, but however, one incident or experience is one too many. I would like to highlight the remarkable works of Doreen Phillips, our Equalities Officer, and the huge efforts that she makes in ensuring that Angus Council is an inclusive and equally fair workforce that promotes diversity and values everyone regardless. Doreen also strives to ensure that everyone living with Angus has the same access and quality of service, and is exemplar to all that Angus Council should be and does stand for. At times, scrutiny and challenge is needed to ensure we do indeed fulfil our legal obligations, our moral obligations, and deliver on our promises. I have every confidence that as a council we do this and will continue to do so to ensure that Angus is a great place to live, work and visit. And I would further like to extend my thanks to Danielle and also offer further engagement with Danielle to ensure that we do indeed help carry forward some, if not all, of the plans that she has, because I think, as Councillor Laurie has said, Black lives do matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Convener. The SNP would like to congratulate Councillor Laurie for bringing forward this important motion at this time. And rather than amending it, as we had perhaps thought at the beginning, we've worked together to enhance it, ensuring that here in Angus we're taking direct action and adding to what is already happening, particularly in education. We also need to know the employment situation within the council and the methods of monitoring that, and Councillor Hands will deal with that in a bit more detail. Thank you so much, Danielle. That was so important for us to hear your experiences, the experiences of your friends, relatives, and your constituents. And as white people in Scotland, we actually need to hear that, and we need to hear it often. We, for some reason, still seem to believe that we in Scotland are more accepting of differences than in other parts of the UK and abroad indeed. That's patently not the case, and we need to understand that. I think we need the empathy to try to put ourselves in the position of BAME people, trying to live a normal, happy life, working in a job that you want to do, living in a community you want to belong to, and ending up being harangued, discriminated against by some incredibly ignorant, unfeeling and cruel people. Young people need to know where this comes from. They need to understand institutional racism and need the opportunity to explore the history of discrimination against Black and Asian minority ethnic people, and through discussion, learn about empathy and their personal responsibility. You know, I lived in Kenya for 4 years. I wasn't maybe an ordinary expat because I lived with Africans for 3 out of 4 of these years. Do you know, only once in that time did I feel I was being targeted because I was white. What does that say? That's about white privilege. We weren't very keen on the letter going to the Scottish Government because there is a hate speech bill going through Parliament, and therefore felt it was a bit unnecessary. But in the spirit of cooperation, we'll agree to this as we feel there are more important local issues that we can deal with. And Actually, it's also good that the Scottish Government knows that we've had this debate today and that we're taking action. So please support this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine, and thank you for your cooperation with Councillor Laurie. Can I move to Councillor Hans?
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, I would just like to say a big thank you to Councillor Laurie for accepting the additional parts to the motion. It was a very important motion you brought forward. I'd also just like to address maybe a bit of the wording of the motion, because obviously I've mentioned BAME staff and BAME residents, and the reason I've done that is because it's linked to the Equality Act duties that are coming up for the council in 2021. We have to be very careful about not discriminating against one ethnic group from another, but I do think it's an excellent opportunity to take on board what we've heard from today's presentation, to work with local BAME organisations, BAME residents, and to be honest with you, in 2022, I'd love to see some BAME elected members be elected in Angus. But as Daniela was talking through her presentation, it brought me back to the experience of my oldest daughter's first year, at her first day at nursery. Her and a little girl in the class called Gift, we turned out that her mum was from Zambia, and then their 3 children ended up being best friends with my 3 children. My 3 children succeeded through school with some issues because of their disability, but they were dealt with. My friend's 3 children, along with their parents, ended up immigrating to Canada. We have to stop that. So I'm really, really glad this motion's been brought forward today, and I hope everybody does support it, because you know what? Children were just the same. It's just how they were treated differently, and we have to stop that.
Thank you, Councillor Hans. Councillor Sturrock.
Right, that's me unmuted. Thank you, convener. Where do we start? Right. I commend the conduct of the recent Black Lives Matter event in Dundee. It was well done. But coming on, do Black Lives Matter? As a believer in society continually striving towards driving out inequalities wherever they may arise, then unarguably, yes. But in the broader context, as we endeavour towards a truly equal society, it then becomes consistent that all lives matter if we are to achieve that goal. However, within the motion, there was 2 points that struck a note of caution on my part. And both these points related to law enforcement, which Daniele has mentioned in her opening speech. And from me, can they be construed as a thinly veiled implication that there remains stubborn culture of systemic racism within police forces? And if yes, what do we do about it? Now, one of the proposals, and this is a controversial proposal in eradicating endemic culture, and this is by Black Lives Matter themselves, states, developing and delivering training, police monitoring and strategies for the abolition of police. Now, that makes me extremely uncomfortable, and I could never support it, because it goes from the Black Lives Matter into the Black Lives Matters project. That's what's causing me in concern. It's the political element of this. It's not the racism. But just you've mentioned the letter, Councillor Devine mentioned the letter, and I'll turn to the request for the letter to be sent to the Justice Secretary. Now, given that the 2 referenced events are yet to proceed through A, US courts, and B, the Scottish Judicial Review, and I note the extremely late change to the motion in this regard, but with no reference to the legal implications in the US. So that's another story. Therefore, any recommendations ensuing will be made at a future unspecified date, and would therefore not elicit any form of substantive response at this time. And I think that would be self-evident, because from that there may be all sorts of recommendations, etc., that we can carry forward. So, Leader, while I remain cautious, and now with regard to the extreme lateness of further additions to the motion which were published today, which time has prevented me from assessing properly, I cannot support the motion as it stands and will therefore abstain. But I will repeat my earlier invitation to Daniele that we have a meeting so we can discuss these things on a fuller forum. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sturrock. Thank you for your comments. Can I go to Councillor Angus Mcmillan Douglas, please?
Thank you, Convener. I support this motion. As many colleagues know, I ran a company in Africa employing some 3,000 to 4,000 people, nearly all of whom were Arab, Asian, or Black Africans. This taught me in a very practical way two things: that unfair discrimination is damaging to the victim as it prevents them from properly fulfilling their dreams and aspirations. But it is also deeply damaging to the company, organization, or country within which the discrimination is practiced, as it robs that country or organization of the skills that the victim could have contributed. And talented victims will just take their skills elsewhere if they're able to do so. We have come a long way as a nation. Having the brilliant Rishi Sunak as our Chancellor of the Exchequer is one example of this. But there is much further to go. All our citizens should feel included and inspired to fulfill their potential. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I move to Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to come in on the back of the point that Councillor Sturrock made. There is nothing in the British Black Lives Matter movement around defunding the police. That may well be in the American manifesto, but it's not here. And the police, as we know from the last scrutiny and audit meeting that we had, are engaging with diverse communities and want to do that better. I raised the issue of hate crimes and the lack of statistics, and they're going to address that for us on a rolling basis. And as Daniela said, it's not merely enough to not be racist, we must be anti-racist. And if people are missing the meaning of the Black Lives Matter hashtag, they are not listening to Black people and people of colour. No one, absolutely no one, is saying that all lives don't matter. What's being said by Daniela and many others is that Black lives have not mattered enough in the past, and we need to address this now. I was very privileged to have been in an online event on the 8th of June, which was facilitated by one of my counterparts in Glasgow City Council, Councillor Graham Campbell, who is Scotland's first African Caribbean person to be elected in the whole of Scotland. Now, given the links with the slave trade in Glasgow, Dundee, and across the country, in fact, that was poignant and it was profound. So this online event was geared towards people of colour, Black people, talking about their lives in Scotland to councillors, to MSPs and to MPs, and there were well over 100 people in that discussion. We listened and we heard. That was our contribution, and it needs to be part of an ongoing process. It's not a one-off. It needs to be how we live our lives and how we do what we do for the whole of our community, and I'm really keen for Daniela to hear that. It's so important that tying into what Ben has said already around no decisions being made for us without us. And I really, really want us to be part of that process. And if you are coming at the Black Lives Matter campaign from the point of view of all lives matter, then that's because you're deeply immersed in white privilege. And that's a learning opportunity. And I would hope that people around this table will pick that opportunity up and find out more, speak to people, read about it, explore, and challenge the views that you have come to because of your own life experiences. Human rights belong to us all, and making sure that others' human rights are protected does not diminish yours or mine. People just want their lives to matter too, in a way that they have not before, and I really hope that we can all vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I'll go to Councillor Miles.
Thank you. Like others, I will be supporting this motion. It's often been said, what can we do in Angus to help this? Well, as Daniela indicated, racism often starts at a young age, and children at the school at a young age can exhibit racist taunts without recognising what they're doing through ignorance rather than anything else. So point 6 in the motion highlights what we can do. We can instruct our teachers and educationalists to give a full legacy of our history so that everyone can then be taught at an early age what the history is and how all lives matter, and not to discriminate in any way, shape or form. So this can be done and should be done at an early age, and this is what we can do in Angus, is make sure the full legacy of our history, all our history, is taught. Thank you.
Okay, I'm right. I see Councillor Sturrock's got his hand up. I did, Bob. Right, I didn't note that that you had already spoken. Is that correct? I've got so many speakers down here. Councillor Sturrock, I'm going to let you come back in, but I would ask you to keep this short, please.
Yes, it's only a very short point. It's only a very short point, and it's something that Councillor Bell said that I'm mistaken in stating that the Black Lives Matter strategies for the abolition of police. That's not my words. That's their words, and this follows on the back on the crowdfunding campaign they had, where they raised over £1 million, and this is one of the things that they said they will spend the funds on. Now, please do not conflate my views on anti-racism with the political element. They're two separate things for me. I support the anti-racism that everybody's spoken about without question, but it's the political element for me that causes me the issue. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Sturrock. I believe we've had a lot of questions here. We've had a lot of comments here. I believe that I can understand Councillor Sturrock, if he wishes to abstain, that is not a problem. That is not a problem. What I'm going to ask now is that the motion is agreed.
Convener, just at this juncture, Councillor Whiteside wishes to speak, and also Councillor Laurie has the right to sum up if he so wishes.
Right. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to add my heartfelt thanks to Daniela for coming along today and being so moving with our deputation. I thank Councillor Laurie for bringing the motion. I thank Councillor Devine for amending it, and agree with everything that Councillor Bell has said today. I disagree with some of the comments we've heard today, and I think some of the comments we've heard today illustrate exactly why this motion was required, and I hope that we can move forward and implement everything that's been proposed. Thank you again, Daniela. It was very, very good to hear from you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. Councillor Laurie, would you like to sum up?
Yes, Convener, I'll start off with some thanks first and foremost to Daniela. It was very important that she came and spoke to us today, and she did so remarkably well. She could even be a potential Angus councillor one day, who knows, let's wait and see. But I'd also like to thank Councillor Speed for seconding, my fellow councillors for their support in this, and the opposition for their constructive contributions. I particularly enjoyed hearing Councillor Bell's anecdote about the event she attended in June, hosted by Graham Campbell. I met Graham at the Dundee demonstration. He was a very inspiring guy, and I've been in contact with him since on these issues, so that was good to hear. To submit, this isn't an anti-white motion. It isn't about stoking tensions, and it's not about simply being not racist. This motion is about kickstarting a dialogue and being actively anti-racist, seeking out racism and rooting it out at the source. Please support this motion, and let's make Angus a truly inclusive area to work and live.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Can I just basically sum up myself? Danielle, I thought you did extremely well. You have certainly given us the questions and the debate that this motion did deserve. Can I just say that if you wish to go into politics, I was 50 before I went into politics. I'll be 66 when I retire, and it can't come too soon now. It's a very, what I found over the last few years, it's extremely difficult. Difficult decisions have to be made. And if that's the path you wish to take, and I did at 50, and I do not regret it, I wish you well. Is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the council and committees. One is the minutes of the council meetings to submit for approval as correct records. The minutes of meetings, and I'm not going to read them all out. A, B, C, and D. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. I'll move on to the minutes of the committees. They're all for noting. There is one exception, and it's the Special Arrangements Committee of the 23rd of June 2020. I'm going to ask that all the others, and that is E to V minus that one, are agreed. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
I'm going to ask Councillor Moore, who has asked for a change of the Special Arrangements Committee of the 23rd of June, and ask him to read out his changes, please.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, on item 17, land acquisition at Jubilee Park, Letham, I would ask that it be changed to read, there was submitted report number 182/20 by the Director of Infrastructure seeking approval to acquire land at Jubilee Park, Letham on behalf of the Housing Revenue Account. Councillor Moore, as a local member, had no objections to the land acquisition, noting that the western part of the site was already under HRA ownership and that access to the site was proposed to be taken from the existing development of Braptelo Gardens and or Jubilee Park through the ground in the ownership of the council. He suggested, however, that as both proposed accesses were on the same corner of the site, would bevour what he considered inadequate road networks, one running between sheltered housing, and would emerge onto virtually the same section of Dundee Road, consideration be given by officers to access being taken through a second access point, possibly onto Brayhead Road by the school. The report noted that purchase by the HRA of the site proposed would facilitate delivery of a joined-up development which met the planning brief and fitted the Letham village scape with an appropriate mix of houses meeting the needs of local families and provided better connectivity between parts of the village and the school. The committee agreed to approve the acquisition of the land at Jubilee Park, Letham, as detailed on the plan, Appendix 1 to Report 182/20, on behalf of the HRA for the development of affordable housing at a purchase price of £240,000. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you are any of the members of the special arrangement committee against that? It says my thoughts going back to that meeting. I don't have any problem in agreeing. Is it agreed, or any comments from the members of that committee? No. I'm going to agree the changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, agreed. Thank you. One last one. Members of the Special Arrangements Committee are asked to approve the undernoted minute as a correct record. And that, no, wait a minute. That is the W, Special Arrangements Committee. We've just changed that. So we're all happy with that.
Yep.
Right, thank you. We will move on to item 4. And that's the motions in terms of Standing Order 25(1). The first one is unadopted roads. Councillor Moore has submitted the following motion. Councillor Moore, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Thank you. Convener, members, this motion is before you because all wards have unadopted roads. This doesn't mean private roads leading to just a few houses. These are public thoroughfares, yet they're supposed to be maintained by private individuals. There are unadopted roads in every ward in Angus and probably in every ward in the whole of Scotland. There may be some residents who can afford the upkeep of these roads, but there are many, many more residents who are unable to do so. How these unadopted roads came about is an issue which may be worth investigating at some point, but the priority is to obtain relief for the people who are being penalised simply because of where they happen to live. We, like everybody else, can drive down their street, but they have the responsibility of keeping the road in a state where vehicles can use it. I know there are unadopted roads in Angus which are in such poor condition that the council's own refuse lorries don't go down them. The residents have to trek their wheelie bins to a collection point at the end of the road. The council is not responsible for the upkeep of unadopted roads, even though sometimes in the past it or its predecessor council generously surfaced the road when it had no obligation to do so. This treatment didn't mean the council accepted liability for the road. The council has neither the responsibility nor the resources to maintain these roads, while the people who live beside them can't afford to either. The situation is deteriorating daily, as are the roads. I believe there needs to be a national conversation on this matter. The Scottish Government and the UK Government need to be involved. They need to be providing the resources to help alleviate the situation, which is why I'm asking the Chief Executive to get our MP and MSPs involved. And I trust that their replies will be circulated so we can understand their position. The Council could play a small part in addressing this issue. There is currently a policy in the local development plan prohibiting development on unadopted roads. Perhaps we as a council might consider amending this policy to allow development on unadopted roads, provided the developer brings the access infrastructure up to an adoptable standard. Convener, members, the costs are prohibitive. They are way beyond the means of individual residents. Even if this council still had the £61 million per annum that is being cut from its budget, that would only make a dent in the issue. In my local village of Letham, there are 14 unadopted roads. I've been advised by officers that to bring them up to an adoptable standard would cost a 7-figure sum, and that's just for one village. The last part of my motion asks for a report detailing the costs of bringing unadopted roads up to an adoptable standard. This will allow us all to understand the enormity of the issue. We know where in our wards the unadopted roads are, but we don't know what the financial impact is. This is a national problem and it needs a national conversation. Someone has to start that conversation. I do so now and I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Have you a seconder?
Yep, Councillor Laurie.
Councillor Laurie, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, convener. It's frustrating when we're approached by constituents raising issues with roads that should be easily fixed, only for us to be thwarted with the news that the road is unadopted and there's nothing we can do to help. I'll be seconding this motion, which shines a light on this very frustrating issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. We have Councillor Mcmillan Douglas.
Thank you, convener. Being a bit slow at getting my mute off. I support this motion also. There are a number of unadopted roads in Kirriemuir and Dean Ward, particularly in Kirriemuir and Westmuir, but also in Cortagy and other places. As these roads fall into disrepair, it can affect drainage, regularly does affect drainage most winters, and also the ability, as Councillor Moore has said, of waste vehicles to get to houses. This can mean elderly residents having to push their dustbins unreasonable distances just to get their waste collected. Councillor Proctor and I have been raising this issue for a number of years. Council officers have been sympathetic, but Angus Council does not have the resources to deal with this historical problem. This is more than a local problem. It is therefore right for government at its two levels to provide the resources to allow all our citizens to be properly connected. In Kirriemuir and Dean, we are lucky now in that most households have access to decent broadband. The same should be true of our roads. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are a huge number of unadopted roads. Councillor Moore has mentioned farm roads, but of course, many farms have sold off land and there are lots of private houses down farm roads. So I think defining the unadopted roads is going to be an enormous task. We don't know where they are because we'll keep finding new ones. I think this is asking the officers to do an impossible task, and it would be hugely expensive. Across Angus, it will be hugely expensive. Across Scotland, it will be hugely expensive. And of course, we're involving our MPs. So across the UK, it would be hugely expensive. I just feel on top of COVID-19 and Brexit, and I'm noting the fact that we're now in a recession, this is just going to be like trying to find some gold at the end of the rainbow. This is just completely impossible. And to be honest with you, I think we're asking our officers to waste a huge amount of time cataloguing this, and realistically, nothing is ever going to happen. So I'm afraid to say, much as I sympathise with people who live in unadopted roads, I'm proposing we reject this motion, and I'm proposing the direct negative.
Are you putting in an amendment, Councillor Duff?
No, I'm proposing the direct negative. We reject it.
Okay. Have we got any further comments?
I think, convener, at this stage, if Councillor Duff's moved a formal amendment, we require a seconder.
Councillor Duff?
Somebody going to second me?
Yeah, I'll second you.
Yes, I'll second you now that I've unmuted myself. I'll second it, Alec King.
Okay. What we've got to remember here is that in Angus we know most of these roads anyway, so I think the workload that we're speaking about. I mean, I've been round Lethem myself with Councillor Lumgear, and some of the roads are absolutely horrendous. So I don't think it would be the amount of work that perhaps Councillor Duff is actually suggesting here. Gold at the bottom of a road or a rainbow. Yeah, I think that's you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right there. But at the end of the day, if we don't ask, we don't get. So I'm going to agree with with the motion. If there's any others, we've got a number of speakers coming up. Councillor Lumgear.
Yes, I have probably more experience of uninterrupted roads in Latham. I've spent a lifetime in Latham. I've also spent a great deal of time when we've got road trimmings from the council and done up roads like a Brayhead Road. Spent a great deal of time, and with help from other people, done a great deal of work. Unfortunately, now getting road trimmings to do a little bit of self-help is impossible because we're not allowed to get road trimmings. But I feel I'm leaning towards agreeing with Councillor Duff on this. It's an impossible task. How do you bring a 6 feet road up to adoptable standards? You just can't do it. I'm not going to go against Councillor. I'm not going to go against the motion because it would be wrong for me to go against the motion. But I do have feelings and lean towards what Councillor Duff has said as well. That it's just about an impossible task. But I shouldn't probably say that. But that's my feelings. That I'd like to see something done, but I think it's an impossible task in the meantime. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Lumgear. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I wondered if it would be possible to hear from either the communities convener or Mr. Ball on the resources required for this and whether it's actually a feasible project.
Councillor Fairweather, I was trying to raise my hand there. I'm not sure if it's showing.
Yeah, I've got you down, Councillor Salmon.
Councillor Bell here. When I saw this motion coming forward, I had similar concerns to Councillor Duff about the officer time involved. I'm hoping Mr. Cochrane is with us today. I did have a discussion with Mr. Cochrane of whether his department did have time to do this. If Mr. Cochrane's with us, hopefully he can just give us some information on that.
Right before I go to all the other hands that are up, I think I've got everybody. Is Mr. Cochrane there?
Thank you, convener. Sorry, that was just while I was getting unmuted there. It does seem a long time ago that we discussed this motion with Councillor Moore, as it was pre-COVID. I'm content with the wording of the report as it stands, that it is for us to note those unadopted roads that are currently a concern for continued council service delivery. Like most of you, we are familiar with the particular roads in each of your boroughs. We have a long history on some of them, and we're familiar with them, so it's possible for us to comment on that. And the other element is that the estimate that we've been asked to provide is a standard estimate for a kilometre of road, and we'll give obviously a breakdown of information on that. So I was content with Councillor Moore's motion in terms of the resources that it would require for my service.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Cochrane. We've heard from Councillor Bell and Salmon. Councillor Speed, did you want to speak?
Sorry, no, am I off? Sorry, I put my hand back down just because some of the points were already made. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Miles.
Yes, Convener, and thank Mr. Cochrane for his response. This is a difficult problem, as people have highlighted, but just because it's difficult, it shouldn't mean we should do nothing about it. I mean, the alternative for not doing this is bury our head in the sands and just ignore it and hope it'll go away. Well, it'll never go away, and if we don't make a start, we'll never get this problem resolved. So It may be difficult, but as Mr. Cochrane said, it's not overly costly to at least come up with an estimate, and we can make a start on this. And if there is money being made available, then we can do it, albeit slowly. Every journey starts with a small step. So if we can make that first small step, we can maybe help to alleviate the problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miles. Can I go to Councillor Hands?
Yeah, thank you. Although it might not be a very difficult thing to do, I do actually think it will be, because as soon as we draw up a list of unadopted roads, you bet your bottom dollar you're going to have a huge inbox with other people telling you what. I have to say, when I bought my house in Angus, I went and bought that house knowing it was on an unadopted road, and I felt that was my responsibility. And it was from my solicitor to tell me that was what the situation was. However, I do get emails from people about issues with unadopted roads. They do have their problems as well. I'm not, undermining that either. But what I'm actually concerned with in terms of the level of cost. So, what as a council are we going to tell constituents we won't be funding because we're spending huge amounts of money on roads? Maybe this is something we could have done 10, 20 years ago. In the current climate, I'm not quite sure our constituents will really see this as their #1 priority. And finally, if you're talking about involving the Scottish Government and Westminster governments in funding this, could we actually delay the letter until we can get the Taste Cities deals finally signed off first?
Thank you, Councillor Hands. Councillor King. Councillor King.
Yes, I'm hearing you. It's just the fact that having to unmute yourself just catches me unawares. Yes, I mean, this has been a problem for many years. And Councillor Hands is absolutely right that your solicitor should tell you when you're thinking about buying a house that you have an obligation to maintain the roads. And if you can't afford that obligation, then you really should not be buying the house. I know that sounds hard, but it's a fact of life. If you can't afford what you're going to be going for, then you can't afford to expect someone else to do things for you. So I think really this situation is way beyond what we can deal with. It is something which is an open-ended bucket. You can pour the resources in at the top, and I can assure you, as has been commented elsewhere, that once we start repairing unadopted roads, there will be a very, very large number of roads appear suddenly that need maintenance. I think that the direct negative here is the correct way to go. The officers can keep an eye on the situation in the future, but we should not be at this stage seeking to get any additional assistance to meet what, after all, is a private obligation which people who live on unadopted roads entered into willingly when they bought their house.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Braze. Can I ask the members unmute their mics, please? That way we'll maybe get this done a little bit quicker. Just don't be jumping in, still put your hands up, but unmute your mics, your microphones, please. Councillor Braze.
Yes. Yes, I live in an unadopted road. It's probably of a much easier standard to raise to make it acceptable for adoption than any road or many of the roads in Letham which are unadopted. And I would certainly be going for this as a householder, and everyone else will be as well, and that's been pointed out already. We maybe think we know how many unadopted roads there are, but they'll come out of the woodwork. The other point I would like to raise is there are unadopted roads which are maintained through a management agreement across in various locations in Angus. And well, the impetus for them is just to let these roads decay, decline, and then expect someone else to pick up the bill to mend them and maintain them. I think it's just absurd, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Councillor Boyd.
Yes, I think we're opening a complete and absolute can of worms here if we were to go for this. It's been something that in the 9 years that I've been a councillor, you do get them, and it rears its ugly head every other 3 or 4 years. Why is my road not adopted? You know, in the end of the day, if you're buying a house, it would also have to say within the reports. So Councillor King was quite right to say solicitors should be advising on that situation, but it's also part of the home report as well. And I remember a gentleman phoning me up and saying, oh, why? I seem to be getting a bargain of this house. Well, you're getting a bargain of this house because it wasn't the adopted road, and it cost them 20,000 but then what will happen is back to what Councillor King said many times, but it falls on the council. I expect that of the council. A gentleman, when we were sorting out the pathways, the safe pathways only a month ago, was saying, well, that's what I pay my road tax for. You know, we're genuinely, and I think officers are stretched. I accept what Ian Cochrane said, but on the other hand, that department have so much on their hands just now, from speeding, from 20 miles an hour, from potholes, from everything else. I just think it is something that we should be saying. We have difficult decisions to make, as you say, Councillor Fairweather. This to me isn't a difficult decision. You know, we just don't have the resource. The staff don't have the resource. They're all working from home. It's just not on. I'm sorry, I can't back this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Leader. I do think the issue of unadopted roads is concerning, but since we do tend to struggle to maintain our actually adopted roads, filling in potholes, maintaining infrastructure, I'm sceptical at whether this is a priority for road maintenance funding. However, as a great believer in the phrase "shy Ben's getting out," I also note there is no timeline on creating a report. So I would trust officers to do this when they get around to it, rather than make it a priority. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Salmond.
Sorry, I was just going to ask Councillor Moore a question, which maybe hopefully will clear this up. If I understand your motion correctly, you're not asking for Angus Council to use any of its money to upgrade unadopted roads. You're actually to look at funding this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm looking at asking the government effectively to look at how this can be addressed. I'm not asking the council to put money in, I'm just asking the council to tell us how much an indicative cost per kilometre or mile, so that we understand what the problem is and how big a problem it is, and ask the MPs and the MSPs to go to the government and to go to the government ourselves and say, this is a problem, somebody's got to grasp the nettle at some point. And this motion was actually submitted pre-COVID and would have gone to the first council meeting that had been cancelled. It's just been carried forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. I don't know if there's anybody else wanting to speak. No.
Councillor Darnos.
I'm going to leave right after yourself, Councillor Durno. I think we've heard enough regarding this one. On you go.
I know where Richard's coming from, because I always get things about unadopted roads as well, but I think it's probably something you want to bring to the Northern Roads Collaboration Team, because if you're going to be submitting a motion like this to the Scottish Government, the Northern Roads Collaboration Team has a lot of places that they couldn't possibly do that. If you look at Argyll and Bute, if you were going to do unadopted roads in Argyll and Bute, you know, it would be well over millions and millions of pounds. And it's like Councillor King said, when you go to buy a house in a location and you've got a side road, you basically know that you're going to have to look after the road yourself. And we can't even winter maintenance on some paths and villages last year. We couldn't put down winter maintenance. So getting enough money so that we can actually resurface roads is going to be pretty impossible. So I think it's maybe something you want to bring to the Northern Roads Collaboration Team and let it be discussed as a nationwide thing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durno. I'm going to ask Councillor Moore if you can, if you would like to sum up.
Yes, thank you.
Very
quick.
Sturrock wishes to speak.
Pardon?
Councillor Sturrock has indicated he wishes to speak.
Councillor Sturrock, I just said that I was going to let anyone else. Can you keep it short, please?
Yeah, all I'm going to say, Councillor Fairweather, is that I agree with the approach that Councillor Durno has just highlighted with the Northern Roads.
Super, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just address a few issues. The firstly was that I discussed and agreed this motion with Ian Cochrane prior to submitting it. We did have a discussion about my original motion. We modified it so that Ian had the resource to address it. I didn't mention farm roads. I stated public thoroughfares, not the ones that are going down to 3 or 4 houses, but the ones where you can drive on the road to go from A to B, but somebody else has to pay the cost. And I've heard a lot about you buy the house, you know you're going to get the road. Well, that's not the case in some parts. In Letham, for example, the plots were sold off for housing and the roads were retained by the estate. But nobody knows what the thump is going on now with the estate. So these people don't own the road. They don't have a responsibility for maintaining it, but people are turning around saying, it's your road, you should bring it up to spec. We need to start a conversation to find out how we address this problem. I've heard people saying it's been going on for years. It'll go on for years yet if we don't do something at some point. And what I'm asking is that we pass this motion now and we start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Okay, it's going to the vote. So, can the clerk let us know?
Yes, sorry, thank you, convener. The motion by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Lawrie, is to approve the terms of the motion as circulated. The amendment by Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor King, is to reject the terms of the motion. Please vote motion or amendment. Councillor Fairweather.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
On the basis of the timings wrong, the amendment.
Councillor Boyd.
The same amendment.
Councillor Braze. Sorry, Councillor Braze, can you just confirm you cut off there?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Hans.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Amendment.
Councillor Lawrie.
Motion.
Councillor Lumgear.
Motion.
Councillor Mcmillan Douglas.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Moore.
Motion.
Councillor Miles.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Salmond.
Motion.
Councillor Speed. Councillor Speed, you're muted. Sorry, Councillor Speed.
amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Sturrock.
Motion.
Councillor Wan.
Motion.
Councillor Whiteside.
Amendment.
Motion's carried by 14 votes to 11.
Thank you. We'll move on. Number 2 is the removal of gull species from SNH general licences. Councillor Stewart has submitted the following motion. Councillor Stewart, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Convener, could I just ask members now, after we've done the roll call vote, if you can put your microphones back onto mute, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Colleagues, nesting seagulls for years have caused our constituents problems, more so in our coastal towns, but not exclusive to them by any means. Under the strict legislation, we have been limited in what we can do to keep the breeding gulls under control. Now, since the Scottish Natural Heritage have removed all gull species from the general licence, I feel the situation is only going to escalate, where we will have an even more serious problem than what we are already enduring. For quite a number of years now in Angus, we have been providing free treatments by way of our nest and egg removal service, which was available to all residents. While this was a welcome service, due to the recent legislation, we are no longer able to offer this. Scottish Natural Heritage have increasing concerns about their decline in conservation status. If anyone from Scottish Natural Heritage ever visited Angus in the breeding season, they'd be left in no doubt that numbers are not in decline. Last year, over 500 complaints were received by this council from constituents to report nesting gulls on their property. I understand that Montrose and Arbroath are coastal towns, and traditionally this is seen as a natural habitat for the seagulls. But if you think back 30 to 40 years ago, while seagulls were always present in the coastal towns, you very rarely saw them in built-up areas of the towns, residential areas and the like. They chose to stay on the coastline. Nowadays, they're so brazen and vicious and happy to venture into our town centres in search of food. I've had complaints, as have some of my colleagues in other wards, from many constituents who have been swooped at, with one even having her head split open from swooping gull, which required treatment at the minor injuries unit. In my own experience, I've had a gull venture into my house helping it sell my dog's breakfast. The visitors in our towns, do they want to have their cream scone or fish and chips pinched by swooping gulls when they visit one of our many cafes with outdoor seating? The answer, I don't think that would be yes, they'd be a resounding no. This isn't just a problem for residents and visitors. Cafe owners with outdoor seating suffer too. Only a couple of weeks ago, this was highlighted by business owners keen to maximise the amount of customers they can cater for due to social distancing rules, where food was swooped on as soon as it was put down in front of their customers. Of course, we the public, we've got a part to play as well. There's some irresponsible people out there when they discard takeaway food and the like. It's like Christmas has come early for the gulls. And I'd like our officers to look into issuing penalty notices to those who encourage the gulls by irresponsibly discarding the food. Although it's not illegal to feed seagulls, the situation is not helped by people who repeatedly engage in this practice. But even when the food is discarded responsibly, birds manage to get into bins to retrieve the scraps. On bin day, I'm sure it will be the same Angus over. Bins regularly have their contents strewn all over the road by gulls in search of food before they have been emptied by our waste operatives. In my opinion, nest and egg removal was never the cure, but it did help the situation. For every egg and nest removal treatment we carried out, you can be sure there were hundreds more being built on property within other areas of our towns. The gulls are now even venturing into other Angus towns with constant complaints from residents in Brechin, Forfar and Kirriemuir. Unless Scottish Natural Heritage reconsider this decision, I predict our town will be overrun by this nuisance within 2 years, where seagull populations will end up at epidemic levels. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Have you a seconder?
Yes, Convener, I'm seconding.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, please.
On you go.
I'm happy to second Councillor Stewart's motion. I fully support his call for the reinstatement of Angus Council's successful seagull nest and egg removal service. This service was welcomed by our communities when it was introduced many years ago and played an important part in controlling seagull numbers in Angus. It was extremely disappointing Angus Council had to drop this service earlier this year due to SNH changing their licensing policy. I look forward to SNH agreeing with this motion and allowing Angus Council to restart a seagull nest and egg removal service next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, have we got any comments, Councillor King?
Yes, Convener, thank you. That's me unmuted. Yes, I'm glad that Councillor Salmon mentioned that this was brought in many years ago. This was brought in the days of Angus District Council, not long after I became councillor. And it was run for many years as a successful way of attempting to control gull populations, especially in the Fittletune. But it was noticed latterly that as we controlled the population of gulls in the Fittletune, the gulls decided that they were going to move out into other areas. And that is when they became really dangerous. Because if you approach an adolescent gull who's left the nest, who might be behind a wall or behind a hedge, and the parents are there, you're liable to be swooped on. I don't think Scottish Natural Heritage has really understood the problem at all as far as coastal towns are concerned, and certainly not at all when the gulls start moving into places like Forfar and Brechin and even the city of Dundee and the city of Perth. Gulls are scavengers. They should be strictly controlled so that the only place they get peace to breed is when they're breeding on the cliffs at the sea, not living in amongst our towns and making the mess that they do and providing the danger to young people and to animals and to elderly people in the towns.
Councillor Boyd.
Yes, I think this is an excellent motion. It's getting my full backing and support. I'm glad that you're also taking it to Cllr. I'd also just give the advices that it might be worthwhile speaking to our neighbours in Dundee. I know friends that live in City Quay, and it's not just the danger and the other things that Councillor King has mentioned. It's actually the noise. And I don't know if that's the same. We're blessed in Carnoustie that we don't have the same amount of seagulls, but we want to try and make sure that Arbroath and Montrose are the same. And of course, most of them, if they are down by the sea, they're not into residential areas, and therefore you're not getting the same noise. So that's my only little bit of other further advice, is that I think we should be trying to speak with our adjoining town, or Dundee Council, and seeing if they're having the same problems, because strength in numbers will help the situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Blaze.
Thank you. Yes, obviously there is a huge problem now with seagulls, more so in our coastal boroughs, but increasingly in our inland boroughs, as others have said. But we have to remember that this problem was growing even when we did have the nest removal service. So while this might be a step in the right direction, it's certainly not going to solve the problem. And we'll have to think of other innovative ways to see how we can discourage seagulls from settling in our towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, convener. Yes, Councillor King hit the nail on the head. Certainly, there's moving out from Arbroath, Alec. I've got loads of them in Forfar. Several of them fly away with the half coconuts that I fill with fat for the birds, and several times I've seen the seagulls. So, Tommy, Councillor Stewart, I beg your pardon. Well done for your, and I'm fully supportive of your motion. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Leader. It was just to, I suppose, echo a lot of what's been said and support it. We must do everything we can to support businesses, and it's clear from this goal threat that outdoor eating and sitting is not possible in a lot of areas, even reported by the Courier in Dundee, birds literally swooping from the weight of his hand. And I think ultimately we should be able to decide locally, and the increasingly difficult restrictions mean it's often harder and harder to keep these numbers under control. And I am a firm believer that decisions about goals should be made by people who have to live with them rather than people that don't. So I'm very happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, convener. I'm very happy to support this. I was surprised last week when I looked out over the garden and found gulls fighting with the rooks and crows that are in this area. If they're moving into the villages, then numbers are getting very great. I think we should be trying to control them, as said, keep them on the cliffs, make it uncomfortable for them elsewhere.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, convener. This ties in, I think, to some extent to the issues that we've been experiencing since lockdown has been eased around littering and food waste as well, particularly from fast food outlets. So I think a holistic approach to that needs to be considered. Also, you'll not be shocked to discover kind of partly on the side of the gulls, in that I don't think wildlife should always have to accommodate human activity. However, I do recognise a lot of the safety issues involved in this. So I think I'm happy to support the motion from the point of view that it opens a conversation and perhaps gives us the opportunity to create a solution that works down a middle road, if you like. But then bear in mind that there is human activity that could be modified that would help the problem as well. Thank you.
Bill. Have we got any further comments?
Yes, convener. We have Councillor Durham who's waving, but we also I think have Councillor King. You've spoken. His hand still raised, and Councillor Bell, whose hand still raised. No other speakers.
Councillor Durham.
Can you hear me? Okay. Beth and myself and Craig, we brought this issue up when we were first elected. And at that time, we were told there was only a certain time of year when the nests could actually be, put things through the eggs or removed or whatever. Will this, if we put this motion through, will that still be a standing thing? And if we do put the motion through, do we have the manpower to see this through? Because obviously, if you're going to be doing it all over the place, are you going to have enough people to do this, to take the eggs out the nest or make holes in them or whatever you're going to do? That's really what my concern is. Do we have the manpower to do it?
It would come from a licensed company, I would imagine, as it has done in the past. Councillor Durno.
I contribute there, convener.
Yeah.
It was always contracted out previously.
Yeah.
Right.
Convener, can I intervene? Could you ask Mr. Ball maybe to address that question?
Yes, happy to address that. In terms of the season, Councillor Durno, that would be exactly the same. It's the breeding season. And once the eggs are hatched, then by law, the birds then are protected and you can no longer interfere with them on the nest. So you can only actually remove them while they're still in the eggs. And as other members have pointed out, it is done by an external contractor. And
when my report was approved back in March, I think it was, to say that we were going to have to stop the service, the budget was actually retained and to be used for other purposes, so there wouldn't be a budget implication. The budget's actually still there and it could be used.
Okay, got any further comments? Well, I've got a comment. My resident seagull, he's called Beezer, is sitting on my wall at the moment, and I think he's disagreeing with everything that's been said. However, I'm not going to go against this motion. I did become a bit of a expert in seagulls a number of years ago when I was the vice convener of what was then infrastructure services. I remember the convener, Councillor May, getting sent to China, and I got sent to Dumfries for a seagull conference. At that time, they did say that seagulls were in decline, and hence that's why they're protected. However, I take note of what Councillor Stewart has said, and I will be agreeing with the motion. Is there any amendments for this? If not, can I get Councillor Stewart to sum up?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to address a point that Councillor Boyd had raised there about talking to neighbouring councils. We have done that and will continue to do that. Myself and Stuart Ball, along with the convener, has had meetings with Dundee City Council already, and will continue to liaise with them on methods that they use as well. And I just would like to hope that everyone can support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. There are no amendments, as I understand it. Is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. We'll move on. Motion 4 is COVID-19. Councillor Whiteside has submitted the following motion. Councillor Whiteside, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, and thank everybody for the opportunity to propose this motion. I realise time's moving on, so I'm not going to take too much time. I just like to say that I hope this will be received in the spirit in which it's intended, which is as a people-based motion, an acknowledgement of the human response to what's been a truly unprecedented time in our lives. If anyone had suggested to us last year that we'd spend several months of this year in lockdown with schools and most workplaces closed, contact with loved ones curtailed and travel banned, we'd never have believed it. Even the notion that as a nation we'd accept the idea of wearing face masks in public was mocked. However, here we are. We can all be proud of the way our communities responded. Numerous people stepped up to volunteer, some for the first time in their lives. Whether it was through existing organisations, newly formed community groups, or simply reaching out to neighbours and friends and family members, we all experienced a level of community spirit that we perhaps didn't know still existed. Our health and social care staff have been rightfully applauded during the crisis. They carried on in what must have been a very worrying and extremely stressful environment, and for that we should all be grateful. It was particularly nice to see an article in the Times praising the work of NHS Tayside, whose quick response meant that at one point in April, they were actually testing more healthcare workers than the whole of NHS England. This minimised the effect of staff absences on their service delivery. We should also recognise those in unpaid caring roles whose normal support services have often been suspended, making already difficult situations even harder. We mustn't also forget the leadership, planning and adaptability of our own council leader and management team and the officers who carried on throughout the crisis, ensuring that council services were delivered with as little disruption as possible. Local businesses too, who had to adapt or close, but who did what was necessary to ensure our safety. A large factor in the willingness of people to pull together was undoubtedly the strong leadership shown by our First Minister, her Cabinet and their scientific advisors, and I'm grateful for the clear advice that's been delivered throughout the pandemic. Inevitably, during such an unprecedented event, there have been lessons learnt along the way. However, it is reassuring to have now reached the point where there's been no COVID deaths recorded in Scotland for almost a month. while we shouldn't be complacent, we have reason to be hopeful that the worst of the crisis is now over. I'd finally like to send my thoughts and best wishes to anyone who's been personally affected by the virus, whether by bereavement or just by ill health or continuing problems caused by the virus. Please remain vigilant, everybody, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. Councillor Whiteside, do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do. Councillor Braze.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I'm delighted to second Councillor Whiteside's motion today. She's told us of the extraordinary community effort to support one another across the county and beyond in what is by far the biggest catastrophe in generations. And we aren't out of the woods yet, not by a long chalk. The outbreak in Aberdeen and indeed in Auckland should remind us of that. However, the knowledge that our communities can rally round to help family, neighbours, friends and strangers is, I'm sure, of great comfort to the most vulnerable. The response to the COVID-19 crisis by our Scottish Government under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon has been competent, clear and honest. This has been greatly appreciated by the people of Angus. It has not been easy for anyone. Schools are finally going back this week, but the sheer volume of planning and work involved at all levels to make this possible is quite staggering. And it's not just in our schools, of course, it's everywhere across our society in various workplaces and departments. None of us really know for sure how things are going to develop, and there will be bumps along the road to recovery. The Advisory Group for Economic Recovery put well-being and fair work at the very core of plans, working with business and trade unions. There's training fund, flexible skills programme, jobs for our young people, stimulus package for the green economy and green jobs, extra support for the Digital Boost programme, flexible workforce development. Just some of the things being done to ensure we move on in the right direction into a better future. And I urge colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Councillor Speed.
Sorry. I'm off, yeah. Is it coming through? Sorry, can I put in an amendment, please?
Yes, right. We'll go to debate, but I'll take note of an amendment. Councillor Braden Davey.
No, sorry, it was just to second Councillor Speed's amendment.
Right, thank you. Right, any further comments?
No, we should hear the amendment first before we go into further debate.
Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Councillor Speed, you want to put forward your amendment?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't live up to my name and I did put in a motion, but it was too late. And there were many similarities with Councillor Whiteside, which I fully echo and agree with. However, I would just wonder if we can amend the fourth bullet point to, I guess, help bring unity and solidarity during this worldwide crisis. In keeping with many of the words and sentiments that we've shared today between us, and that we recognise the sacrifices of all, particularly the public and those living within our communities whose lives have been most affected. So I would therefore like to propose that bullet point 4 welcomes the strong leadership and efforts of all throughout this pandemic, and in line with the council plan, this council continues to promote an inclusive Angus that actively cares and reaches out to all, especially those in greatest need of support, and that we strive to leave no one behind. Furthermore, I would like to add, in line with the council plan, that the council continues to work together for the greater good through recovery and beyond, and utilises resources effectively to respond fairly to the areas of greatest need, which our opposition colleagues, did explain very well on that last agenda, or one of the last agenda items there, in terms of utilising resources effectively. I would ask Councillor Whiteside to accept this amendment to help build an Angus-wide partnership, and that we recognise the hard work and sacrifices of so many across Angus.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. You have a seconder, I believe, so it's Councillor Davey.
Yeah, it was. Perhaps before I speak, perhaps Councillor Whiteside would say whether she'd accept the amendment or not, because that will change depending on what I say.
Yeah, yes, right. Thanks for that, Councillor Davey. Councillor Whiteside, we have had cooperation with a previous motion. Would you accept what Councillor Speed has proposed?
Yes, I'm sure if we'd had the opportunity to discuss it beforehand, we would have come to agreement. I'm sure we're both thinking along the same lines, so I'm happy with that.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely super. And I'm in full agreement with that as well. Have we got any? So we don't need a seconder. Have we got any further comments, Councillor Braden Davey?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Whiteside, because I know my initial reading of it, I'd hoped we'd perhaps reach consensus on bullet point 4 for really, a cross-Angus approach to this. And it was also just to perhaps correct, I think maybe mistakenly, a factual inaccuracy that Councillor Whiteside said in a speech. The National Records of Scotland reported that between the 3rd and the 9th of August that 5 deaths were registered where COVID was mentioned on the death certificate. The week before was 7. I think Councillor Whiteside is only referring to deaths in a hospital setting, not those who have unfortunately passed away in the community setting from COVID. And I do hope that the motion, I wish to echo just a lot of what's mentioned in the motion, and making sure that this is, not a political thing, but a cross-Angus approach. So I do welcome Councillor Speed and Councillor Whiteside's comments on that. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Right, so I'd like to thank Councillor Whiteside, and I'd like to thank Councillor Speed for them joining together. Are there any further comments? No. Is the motion agreed? Oh, Councillor Whiteside, would you like to sum up?
I think we'll just go ahead and see if we can agree the motion. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Is the motion agreed? Thank you. We'll move on. Number 5 is support for the local electricity bill. Councillor Devine has submitted the following motion. Councillor Devine, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, convener. Back in 2014, the Department of Environment and Climate Change in the Westminster Government brought out a report which recommended strongly that by 2020, 3 gigawatt of electricity would, indeed should, be produced by community capacity. However, we're here in 2020 and we're only producing about 10% of that. And why is that? Well, I think actually the motion explains it quite clearly, that just how expensive it is to set up and run an electricity company. It's basically only the big 6 that can afford to do that. There are things called codes, which I don't understand, and someone in Power for People tried to explain to me, but they are very complex. And they too are controlled by the big companies, effectively locking out community groups and stopping them providing renewable energy locally and creating local jobs, keeping money in the local economy and giving local people the chance to buy into such ventures. I think we all want to see that. Some councils did set up their own energy companies hoping to do just that, but unfortunately, and maybe not surprisingly, they have failed to make any profit, which has precluded them from continuing, which is a shame. What this bill is looking for is that Ofgem change the market rules to charge community groups proportionate setup and code costs to at least give them the chance to fulfil their expectations. Now, I don't actually know any groups in Angus, maybe some of you do, but I do know that there are hundreds across the UK desperate to take on this challenge for the benefit of their communities and to contribute in their small way to solutions to climate change. Our MP here, Dave Dugan, has already given his support to this bill, and it is a cross-party bill. It would be good if the Chief Executive were to write to the other MPs, letting them know of our Council's support. At present, only 49 local authorities support the bill, but if it's to gain real traction, more local authorities need to step forward, as do MPs. After all, we're all trying to do our best in terms of localism and in terms of climate change. And I see this as just another tool in that box. So please support the motion as it is cross-party. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Have you a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Duff.
Yes, Chair. I'm happy to second Councillor Devine's motion. I'll keep it fairly brief. We've got lots of renewable energy potential in Angus: wind, solar, hydro, wave, and indeed tidal. And we should encourage local and community schemes to generate green electricity, and schemes of the appropriate scale should be given easy and inexpensive access to supply the national grid. So happy to support it and hope you can join me in supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I've got Councillor Sturrock wishing to speak.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm speaking in support of this bill, and to me it's compatible with climate change aspirations together with potential of creating sustainable jobs and making local communities more resilient. I was going to mention the 2014 report, but I saw that Councillor Devine got there, but that's okay. Now, the bill itself is a private member's bill, and it was laid by Peter Aldius, Conservative MP, and with the support of co-signatories from across the floor from other parts, which was an excellent outcome. And there was also considerable support from bodies external to Westminster, including 43 councils in England. For more information, additional background and historical information can be read on powerforpeople.org blog. Now, as I said, it's a private members' bills, and these can be difficult to get onto the statute book because they're fighting for parliamentary time, which is always considerable pressure on. However, there remains another option to have the aims of this private members' bill to be included in the next government energy bill, which may be probably due next year. And we can do this, or the MPs, etc., can do this by maintaining pressure on the government. So in essence, it's now time to deliver power to and for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sturrock. Councillor Boyd.
Yes, fully support this motion, having on a personal basis spent 28 hours trying to get an electric connection with Scottish Power, who are the only people that can actually give me the power, and this taking 4 months or 3 months to try and get this. I certainly hope this could come quicker than what it's been. I'm appalled, and I've said to them many a time, all you need to do is provide power. It's in your name. Us as a council have to do all the complexities that we deal with. As I've used this up on many a time on a conversation with Scottish Power. As I'm saying, power to the people, and localise and people that live locally. We should never have privatised the electric and gas in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boyd. Have we got any further comments? No. Councillor Devine, would you like to sum up?
I don't think so. I'm very pleased to hear what Councillor Sturrock said, and he's absolutely right that because it is a private member's bill, we need as much support as possible. So if you've got any clout with any other MPs, please get them to support this, and hopefully we can make sure that other councils start to do it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine, and I certainly support your motion. So is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 6. That's Freeport status. Councillor Davey has submitted the following motion. Councillor Davey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, please, Leader. I would like to welcome this motion to show our commitment to Montrose Port and our hope of securing Freeport status for Angus. And in the spirit of the many cross-party and consensual agreements so far, I hope that this one, once again, can secure that from across the chamber, virtually, regardless of their rosette or none. Prior to submitting this motion, I asked officials to speak to Montrose Port to ensure that they were in full support, and they are. And this motion puts public our commitment to building strong links and doing whatever we can to support this bid to bring jobs and investment to Angus. The UK government's consultation closed on the 13th of July, and the response is ongoing. The replies will determine the format and structure of what a free port will look like, which will likely mean local areas are required to bid for it, something this motion will, I hope, throw our weight behind. Now, I know some may decide to try and dismiss the idea, to try and say there aren't any benefits, we shouldn't try, let's just not bother. But the UK currently does not have any of these. We're not to know how successful they can be in a UK context. The British Ports Authority say they can stimulate international investment, reshore manufacturing, and ultimately lower prices for consumers. Montrose Port is supportive, so let's get behind it. A free port status could be game-changing for Angus. We already see that so much of Scotland's economic development is focused on the Central Belt. A free port in the northeast will help address this regional imbalance. Free ports across the world have shown what strong private-public partnerships can build. Fantastic industries, economic hubs, and ultimately high-skilled jobs come. This isn't some abstract argument. If we bring in the jobs, we bring in the people. We get the money spent in our high streets, in our restaurants. Young people choose to stay in Angus, and we deliver the training opportunities. And all of this can come from backing these proposals. Free port status would add to the already fantastic economic cluster developing in Montrose. We've seen plans for Scotland's first drone port, Baker Hughes continuing to invest in the area, new businesses moving in, renewable energy expanding, building on the success of Scotland's largest offshore wind farm, right here in Angus, and the list goes on. This can be a hub not just for Montrose, but for the wider Angus area and the northeast. And I make no apologies about getting excited about these opportunities. We can and must continue to be ambitious for Angus. This motion does that by showing our public commitment, and regardless of your views on other political issues, I hope that you will support this motion here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Have you a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Sturrock.
Councillor Sturrock. On you go.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, it's with pleasure I second this motion. And as Councillor Davey have said, I've also spoken with Montrose Port and the CEO and Board of Trustees. Welcome it as a concept. Further to what Councillor Davey said on the all the manufacturing side, people maybe ask what a free port is. Well, basically, it's an area geographically inside the country that is legally outside the country with different tax and customs rules. The benefit is that companies can manufacture, import, re-export goods free of tariffs, but they must go external, not into the host country. Publication of the UK government's free port consultation is expected later this year, by which time the Brexit deal should be agreed, from which structural and operating policy, procedures, guidelines, etc. will become apparent. Notwithstanding the above, the potential for Montrose has been recognised, and work to examine economic benefits needs to continue at pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sturrock. We've got Councillor Boyd. Councillor Boyd. Fair look, now we'll see if he comes back. Councillor Duff.
Oh, sorry, I am there. I'm sorry, and I don't think I should have had my hand up for that as well either. My humblest apologies on both accounts, Councillor Fairweather.
Not a problem, not a problem. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yes, I'm happy to support the motion. I would say I've been a strong supporter of Montrose Port all my time as an elected member. The port's been a real success story over the past 10 years, growing its business. I think it's had 2 record years in terms of tonnage, and it's invested heavily in new quays over the past 10 years. The Sea Green development, which Councillor Davey mentioned, and Montrose members got a very interesting description of that earlier in the week. That's obviously an exciting development for the port. It looks like it will bring something like 120 well-paid jobs to Montrose. It also secures income to the port over the 25-year period, and at a time when oil and gas may decline, that's very good news. I'm very supportive of the free port application. However, it won't replace being a member of the EU and being in the customs union. I know the port management had real concerns about the negative impact of Brexit and also the lack of UK customs offices between Aberdeen and Edinburgh, which could impair Montrose Port's reputation for fast ship turnaround and fast service to shippers. However, I'm happy to support the measure and would wish the port well in it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Yes, I'm very supportive of this too. I do have great concerns about the impact of Brexit, obviously, but anything that's going to help, it's got to be good. And certainly if Montrose Port can get extra business out of this and create more jobs, it's going to be good for Brechin as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Have we got any further comments? Well, I'll make one. I must admit what's been happening at the port over the time I've been a councillor, the last 12 years, 13 years, the big businesses that have come in like Baker Hughes, we've got the 04 project. Excited, of course, we all should be. And Councillor Braze, you just hit the nail on the head there. This is not just for Montrose, this will be for the whole Angus. It's this is absolutely tremendous. So thank you, Councillor Davey, for bringing forward this motion.
Yeah, sorry. I do welcome the cross-party support. And I do welcome Councillor Braze after coming back from his star SNP appearance on the party election broadcast support as well. I wasn't going to head down the route of Brexit at all, in essentially a bid not to get bogged down into a debate which has already happened. But this will become a reality by the 1st of January. And I would point out that a free port status would not be possible had we remained part of the European Union in the first place, nor would we be regaining our fishing grounds either along with many. But alas, I will not get bogged down in this. I would welcome the cross-party support, regardless of your views on Brexit. It will be becoming a reality, so we should be taking all the opportunities.
There is nothing about Brexit in these papers.
No, I'm just saying we should be taking all the opportunities of the free port.
My understanding is that we have got a consensus that we are agreeing this motion. So all I'm going to ask now is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to number 5, appointments. First one is Angus Citizens Advice Bureau Management Committee. The council is asked to note that Councillor Speed is to replace Councillor Lumgare on the Management Committee. Is that noted?
Noted.
Thank you. I have a very noisy seagull right outside my door who's actually agreeing with that as well. Admiral Golf Links is number 2. The council is asked to note that Councillor One will replace Councillor Fairweather as a director of Arbroath Golf Links Limited. As a consequence, Councillor One will now replace Councillor Fairweather on the Golf Governance Member Officer Group. Is that noted and agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move to item 6, and that's the 2019-20 financial outturn and draft accounts update. You have the recommendations for you, 1 to 5. Are there any questions? Councillor Angus Mcmillan Douglas. Is it a question or comment?
Sorry, it's a comment. No, I'm ahead of myself, or ahead of you anyway.
All right, I'll let you off, Councillor Mcmillan Douglas. Are there any questions? No? Okay, we'll go to comments. On you go, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, Convener. My thanks to Ian Lorimer and his team, including Stephen Mill, who I think is here today, for such a clear paper. You will have seen from the paper that the carry forward requests from 2019-20 to 2020-21 are 2.66 million. Most of this amount will come for consideration at the September full council meeting, at which the 2021 budget will be revamped to take account of additional COVID-19 costs. Here today, approval is sought for the £150,000 to be carried forward and used on time-critical items, which is why it's come forward now rather than in September. The most substantial one, as you will have seen, is for a temporary information and governance post, as demand for historical information has increased. We propose accepting these carry forwards. One further point, Angus Council's reserves have been increased by 2.18 million over the 2019-20 period. This is another huge achievement. You will remember that the SNP opposition wanted to spend more of our reserves when the budget was debated in February. We in the administration opposed this, not because we foresaw the scale and prolonged period of the pandemic, but because we in the administration know that you have to be prudent with money. Money is not the most important thing in life, but running out of it causes hardship, particularly for those less well-off citizens. Therefore, over these last 3.5 years, we have had the overarching objective of improving the council's efficiency and living within our means. Thank heavens we did. We shall continue to try and do this into the future. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. We've got Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I just would want to make, I think, 2 points. Firstly, I think we're quite happy to agree the 155,000. I think that's Appendix E, and spend that money, which is Councillor Mcmillan Douglas has said is time critical. So quite happy with that. In terms of the uncommitted general funds balances, I'll just read you 2 figures. On the 1st of April 2019, we had 7.2 million. The 1st of April 2020, we have 1.25 million. That's a something like a sixth of what we had. So I won't make any further comment on that. I think the thing I would like to comment on, and I'm like a broken record here, and that's the capital spending. General fund for the year was 80.4% of budget. That's a pretty poor performance. And I think the housing spend at 66.5% is another dreadful year. I mean, I pointed out last year that the housing spend last year was our worst performance for 11 years. And this is, in fact, in percentage terms, even worse. So really, COVID can't be to blame, because COVID only came in towards the end of March. And obviously, we know the spend for 2021 is going to be very low because of the COVID shutdown. So that is something, given that housing is a high priority for the Council and the Scottish Government, I would say I'm pretty seriously concerned about. I know officers have introduced some measure to try and improve housing spend, but it's still, the numbers don't lie.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Can I just say right regarding housing, I think we've had this conversation before. There are reasons for it, and instead of bringing that up, which I think is pretty petty, to this full council, perhaps you should speak to the officers and get the facts. Okay, I'm going to move on. I've got Councillor Miles.
Yes, Convener. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Lorimer and the Finance Convener, Mr. Councillor Mcmillan Douglas, in achieving these. These have been unprecedented times coming through the COVID, and to come into them with a bit of let's say, reserves in hand that we can handle it. We've seen and heard from other councillors they're struggling to match some of the expenditure determined by the COVID. Angus Council has managed this quite reasonably and has handled it due to the fact we've been prudent in the past. So well done in achieving that and giving us something to build on and giving us something with which to handle these pandemics, none of it which was of course foreseen.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to pick up very briefly on page 115 around equity funding and the underspends. Obviously, today's a big day for pupils going back to school, and I wanted to remark upon that and the amount of effort that I know officers and all the school staff will have gone to achieve this today, including a lot of work at a national level. And we've discussed in meetings before anxieties around health and well-being and mental health and well-being in particular of our pupils. And could our PEF money be utilised to support any COVID-related challenges that our schools are facing with pupils? I just wondered if maybe Mrs. Williamson could quickly comment on that.
Margot?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Fairweather. Thanks, Councillor Bell. Actually, Kelly McIntosh, the director's on the call, so you might want to get a response from her rather than myself.
Yeah, Kelly?
Oh, I hadn't realised that. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks very much for your question. It is true that the government issued new guidance about how schools could spend their PEF money due to the COVID situation. Some of that is about using the money for digital inclusion. And I would have to say that although you see some PEF underspend for last year for some of our schools and some DSM underspend, in percentage terms in relation to their whole budget, those underspends are very, very low in general. All very low for DSM, some a little bit higher for PEF, but the PEF underspend can be explained because our school year is different from the financial year. So some of that money is used for additional PEF staffing to pay them up until the end of July. And obviously some of the PEF activities that were scheduled to happen could not happen. And so the third parties were not paid. In response to your question about the health and well-being of our young people, a lot of the PEF money is spent just on that anyhow, on targeted groups of young people, on their well-being in general, and coupled with their literacy and their numeracy. And the PEF funding is all part of the head teacher school improvement plan. So of course they are now planning in terms of response and recovery to the increased attainment gap and our children's well-being because of the COVID situation. I can give just a specific example that may help you, and it's actually in relation to the DSM underspend at one of our secondary schools, which is the largest DSM underspend. And that head teacher has been saving, as he is allowed to do, for an outdoor classroom, but in response to the needs of his school community due to COVID, he has hired an extra PCS teacher, so a pupil care and support teacher, for this year, because he recognises that his children and young people will need additional help. Does that answer your question?
Leader, could I just ask Kelly to mention the money fee high? I heard from MC McNally today that she's used her PEF money to take on somebody that was dealing with the heart and hub stuff for mental health. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's actually in relation perhaps to the counselling, because Moneyfeith already had some counselling input, and MC has asked that that person has remained because they already have relationships with key children in the school and key staff. And that's happened in more than one of our secondary schools actually. And they're using their PEF money to augment that counselling service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Braze.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. I hope you're not going to criticise me if I talk about the housing revenue account. And the reason I hope that is because as an opposition councillor, it's an important part of my role to scrutinise and audit and hold to account. And the fact of the matter is, I've been excluded from doing that for many months now because I've not been on any of the committees that were functioning. So on the housing revenue account, the underspend and the slippage really is quite atrocious, and it really needs to be addressed. And we have heard reasons, and a lot of good reasons for it, but we need to be cracking on with this. And I'll give you an example of why. I had an email just before this meeting convened from a constituent who's living in an Angus Council house. Her and their children had to move into the living room because it was the only room in their house that wasn't letting water in last night. Now, she has been in touch with the council about it over many months, and she's still living in these conditions, and we have to get our finger out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. No, I'm not going to criticise you, right? And you already said yourself there are good reasons for it. That concerns me. If somebody has been with the amount of rain that came down yesterday, I had a leaking roof, right? But I stay in my own house, and I'll certainly get it fixed. And I would certainly think if it's a council house that our officers have taken that right seriously and are certainly looking at the problem there, Councillor Braze. So thank you, thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I'm sure our officers will be on that on that now. Okay, right, you've got the recommendations in front of you. 1 is note, 2 is note, 3 is note, 4 is note, and 5 is agree. Is the report agreed?
Councillor Salmond and Fotheringham still wish to speak.
Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor Fotheringham.
Councillor Salmond.
And Councillor Fotheringham first.
You're muted.
Sorry, don't know why that went back. It was a question for Councillor Braze, actually. Did I catch you right saying your constituent's been reporting this for many months and there's no improvement?
Problem's been going on for many months.
Would it be possible for you to email me the details of that property?
Yes, I will do, and I'll email officers straight after the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Salmond.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to address part of Councillor Bray's comments there, that he feels he's been excluded in the last 3 or 4 months. But I just wanted to point out that the Deputy Leader of the SNP, Councillor Duff, is on the Capital Project Monitoring Group along with myself and Councillor Mcmillan Douglas. And we have been meeting in the last 3 or 4 months, having virtual meetings. So Councillor Duff is well aware of the issues in the Capital Plan, and he is able to scrutinise them on behalf of the Angus SNP group. So I don't accept that the Angus SNP group don't understand what's going on with the housing issues.
Thank you, Councillor Salmond. Okay, I'm just going to go back. I read out the recommendations and asked if the report was agreed. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item 7. That's the special arrangements in relation to decision-making powers. The update and the report was by the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, Jackie Buchanan. As you see, there are 10 recommendations there. Can I just say, I'd like to thank all the members who were on the Special Arrangements Committee. I do believe it was very, very successful. I'd also like to thank the officers, but to also let us see that the council went on as normal. The work that was done by the SAC to keep the council moving was exemplary. So the recommendations you see in front of you now, I'm just going to ask that if you've got any questions or comments, questions, right, questions first. Any questions? Is there any comments? There are no comments, okay? No comments. The recommendations, as you see, is 1 is notes, 2 agrees, 3 agrees, 4 agrees, 5 agrees, 6 notes, 7 notes, 8 agrees, 9 agrees, 10 agrees, and 11 agrees. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, agenda number 8 is the emergency delegated powers, actions taken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The report is by Jackie Buchanan. If I take that again, you see the one recommendation. Have you any questions? There are no questions. Any comments? There are no comments. As you see, the recommendation is recommended that the Council notes the actions taken by the Chief Executive and Directors in response to COVID-19 pandemic using their delegated powers as detailed in the appendices to this report. I'd like to thank the officers. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Well, we're sailing through this now, aren't we? Number 9, or have I spoken too soon? Number 9, another good news story, in fact a fantastic news story, and I'm sure there will be people who will want to speak on this one. Agenda item 9 is the Humanitarian Assistance Angus Response Team, HAART, HART, and that's the update. The report's by Vivian Smith. Have we any, I'm going to ask for questions first. Any questions? There are no questions. Okay, a couple of hands went up there. Councillor Bell.
The button's not working. Thank you. Well, I'm going to speak on behalf of the entire SNP group because obviously we've had a lot of chance to talk about many things today, and some of this has been covered off by Councillor Whiteside already. And I've already declared an interest in that. I'm a member of the board of Voluntary Action Angus, but it's not from that specific position that I want to speak. What comes through to me today on this paper is the partnership that's been involved in this, and that's something that's really hard to quantify, and it's a very precious resource indeed. What I've witnessed personally at a socially distanced quarters is just how effective and willingly the entire partnership across Angus has rolled up its figurative and literal sleeves and just got on with it. And for that, we are hugely grateful. We're not at all surprised, and we're enormously thankful as well to the Council, to the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, the NHS, the third sector, all our volunteers in the communities, and all the national organisations that have been part of this enormous response as well. People who have never experienced so-called vulnerability before have been cared for and supported within their homes as they've shielded, they've self-isolated, they've lost income, lost their jobs. People who've never been in financial distress before or experienced the inability to feed their families have found practical help when they've needed it. Women and children experiencing domestic abuse have been supported. Mums who've had fences repaired so their kids can safely play in their garden. Others have had help to move house when it's become possible to do so and supported in the meantime. Local food hubs have compiled and distributed food parcels from excess supermarket stock, and boxes and boxes and boxes of supplies have been delivered to doorsteps. And this has drawn on all the resources, the skills, and the knowledge of many, many different people across all of these sectors. That is partnership working at its utmost. And I'm so proud to have been part of this response. It's been amazing. We note from the paper that there are remarks about moving away from digital as default to conversations as default, which I think is a really important sign that we need to retain the humanity in our processes. and we'll never do away with the need for people in those processes. I know how much our citizens have appreciated the regular contact and the humanity shown by people who've been on the end of the phone on the Heart hub, and from our volunteers and from all the breaks van drivers as well. Just quickly looking at the joint appendix from VAA and the Council's Communities team, how much money has been brought into Angus to third sector organisations, over £700,000, that's amazing. Technology, tablets being used to help people affected by domestic abuse or by disability or other needs. And if you look at the amount of activity and engagement across all the borough towns, this partnership has helped and supported those in need. And I'm absolutely in love with the idea of Angus Connect as a way to help us hang on to that and to build on that. So many people have volunteered for the first time. Let's keep hold of that social capital of those people who are desperate to help build that sense of community and being active citizens. I think we have so many positives to draw on from this, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to this paper and to thank all those involved in this partnership for pulling it out of the hat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. I couldn't have put that better myself, but I agree with you 100%. We've got Councillor Laurie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll keep my comments brief, as I'm aware we've been here for a while and Councillor Bell's just covered it much better than I ever could. But I would just say that the work of the aptly named Heart has been absolutely crucial in protecting our most vulnerable during this crisis. And I've got nothing but praise for their collaborative and compassionate approach.
Okay, have we got any further comments? Okay, as I say, you've got the recommendations in front of you. Recommendations 1, note, 2, note, 3, note, 4, note, 5, note, and 6 is to delegate authority to, and you have A and B. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We go on to item number 10.
Convener,
Yeah.
Councillors Duff and Boyd, I think at the outset of the meeting declared an interest. I think both intimated that they would leave the meeting. If that is the case, we'll ask the IT hosts for them to leave the meeting, and then the IT host will allow them back in after the consideration of this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
They get the left.
Councillor Duff, is he up to fourth left now? Yes.
Thank you. Okay, agenda 10 is the Golf Member Officer Group, the interim progress report and recommendations for change from Montrose Golf Links Management Committee. Reports by Vivian Smith. You have the recommendations right in front of you. Are there any questions? Councillor Sturrock. Councillor Sturrock.
Are we online now? I think we are.
Yes, you are. You're
Thank you, Convener. My question was actually primarily aimed at Councillors Boyd and Duff, but having recused themselves, maybe someone else is able to pick it up. Now, my question relates specifically to paragraph 5.2, and this is the makeup of the board of directors. Now, I fully appreciate that there'll be 4 initial members, the 2 elected members, plus 1 member from each of the clubs. And on top of that, there will now be the possibility they will be allowed to co-opt 5 further members. Now, I do not know who these 5 further members will be. I do not know their background, if they all pertain to one club or both clubs. Because what I fear is that with 5 co-opted directors, it may present a permanent imbalance as to the voting structure of the board, operationally, etc., going ahead. So that's the query I have, is to make up on the board unbiased view, or it's not tilted one way or the other.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sturrock. Is either Vivian, Alison, or Mark Armstrong? Can perhaps somebody help with the question from Councillor Sturrock?
It's Alison, if you'd like me to pick that up first. So the proposal is that the discussions they've had would be to establish a management group, and the 5 would be drawn in terms of their expertise in the skills areas that have been determined that the Montrose need in terms of taking the business forward. So they're not specifically drawn from clubs or organisations. They've been considered on the basis of their skills across areas such as HR, finance, legal, etc.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alison. I do appreciate that, but some of these skills are within the clubs anyway. That's where I'm coming from. But maybe they're external to the clubs, and that's what I mean. If they're all coming from one club, that gives them a natural advantage in terms of voting rights.
No, sorry. So just to clarify, they're not being appointed on the basis of any club membership. They're being appointed on the basis of their skills.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Salmond.
Yeah, I find myself personally as an elected member at a great disadvantage here now that the 2 Angus Council elected councillors who are directors have now left the meeting, that I'm unable to ask them questions as the 2 Angus Council directors. So maybe through Alison, maybe Alison can help me. I was intended to ask Councillor Boyd and Councillor Duff how, as the 2 of the 4 directors that we've been asked to appoint today, how they had intended to recruit these new 5 directors. I wanted to know if it was going to be an open and transparent process, so that, i.e., these positions would be advertised and that people could apply for them, and that there would be a sort of scrutiny process to appoint these 5 directors. Can you maybe help me understand how the 5 directors will be appointed?
So from understanding of the proposal that was put to us in terms of what they were wanting the council to consider, that those discussions have happened at the board level, and they've looked to take on and consider who might be able to come on board with them to do that. There aren't plans they have set out in the paper that was sent into us, into the council, who these individuals would be. But and that had been agreed in principle by the board, subject to Angus Council's agreement, obviously.
Sorry, can I come back, David? Just did I understand, Alison? You said that the 5 directors have already been appointed.
No, sorry, the directors haven't. The 5 individuals have been identified for a management group, subject to any decision made here today, and then they would have to be the changes would have to be made to the board structure, and they would have to be then co-opted onto that board.
So there's not an intention to advertise the roles in a sort of like Angus Alive sort of format, where there was adverts placed and there was a panel that chose the new directors?
No, there's no plans for advertising.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Any comments? Okay, you have the recommendations, but oh no, I've got Councillor One.
Yeah, just on what Alison said there, thanks Leader for bringing this in. Does this not go back to what Councillor Sturrock was asking earlier in his concern of a weighted vote with Montrose golf links, if they've already been picked?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding what that question is in terms of the weighted voting. Sorry.
Well, I think Councillor Sturrock had asked the question about, you know, who was coming on board, how they were selecting it. If they've already been selected, I think that justifies another answer to Councillor Sturrock, but I don't know if anybody here can answer that at the moment.
So those selected are not aligned to any club, if the question is about the weighting of the club membership against the council membership.
Okay.
Sorry, David, can I just ask a further question to Alison? So can you just confirm that none of the new directors are members of either of the two current golf clubs that are down there? Because I think this is the issue that Councillor Sturrock has, that we've been asked to agree 2 elected members and 1 from each of the clubs, because there's 2 golf clubs. But I think Ron's question is, if the one or two, 3, 4 or 5 of the new directors were also members of the 2 clubs, there could be a skewed membership vying towards one of the clubs rather than the other. That's, I think, what Ron's trying to ask.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from. It's the balance of the board at the end of the day is what I'm looking, what I need to know.
Okay, so it's and my understanding based on the proposals that they're not members of the clubs.
Okay, and that's what I understood you said, Alison, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alison.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Who wants to speak?
Pardon?
Councillor Stewart's wishing to speak.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, it was just to come back to a point that Alison has said there. I've been had a few discussions with golfers down there, and golfers, I've been advised that they received an email sent out to them with a number of names who were to be included on this committee, and the golfers did intimate that they were members of one of the particular clubs, or certainly some of the members, some of the names were members of the clubs, and they did feel that that was a disadvantage to the other club in terms of there being a balance.
Certainly aware, we were alerted to that they'd sent out some information to season ticket holders and had planned to put out information, and reminded them that no decision had been made by the council. They jumped the gun on that one, and that information was therefore not put online. But I was aware the information had gone out with the new proposals. We reminded them that those proposals had not been agreed.
So we are in effect being asked to follow our recommendation, but we don't know the answer to these 5 co-opted directors. So if we pass this, it doesn't matter what we think in the future, isn't it?
So the proposal that's here today is an interim position. We haven't concluded the work of the MOG, and it was also until the lease came up for renewal. So it was always to be an interim position to try and get Montrose Golf Links back on track and continue to be viable. So it's not a permanent change.
All right, just Alison, I would just like to be kept advised when the 5 co-opted directors are named and their background in any affiliation or not. That would be nice to have. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll do that, Councillor Sturrock. Right, Alison has said this is only an interim progress report. I've got Councillor MacDonald.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Obviously, we've had a bit of discussion about this just now. I was wondering if Jackie would be able to explain the 2024 situation. I think it's on page 170, 171. And what happens then?
Certainly, Councillor MacDonald, just bear with me. I'll just have a look at the detail in terms of that. I take it you're talking about the termination of the lease, the potential end of the lease. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Right. Well, part of the reason for, I think, the MOG being set up is in terms of governance and looking ahead in terms of the contractual arrangements that the council has with each of the golf clubs, and that includes the arrangements for them using the clubs through lease or otherwise. I think some of them through license agreements, some of them through leases. And part of that work, as I say, would be to look at that arrangement and see whether the current arrangement would continue or if in fact that would change. So I'll defer to Alison in terms of that, because she'll be able to clarify that position, but that's my understanding of it.
Yes, I'd agree with what you're saying there, Jackie, in terms of the work of the MOG, and we'll be looking at the future structures, etc., and agreeing that post the current agreement.
Okay, thanks, Alison. But before I move on to, I've got Councillor Hans wanting to speak. We're coming close to the 3-hour limit for the meeting. Obviously, we're nearly there, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to ask members: do they agree to extend the end of the meeting to conclusion?
Agreed. Yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hans.
Yeah, this is really a point of clarification for Mrs. Buchanan as well, because surely the 5 appointed directors, as directors legally, they have a responsibility to remain impartial, both under company law legislation and also common law. So it doesn't really matter whether they've got affiliation to any club or other, they do have the responsibility to be neutral.
Yes, I would agree that they do need to act in the best interests of the company in respect of which they hold a directorship.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon, I see you've still got your hand up. Do you want to ask?
My apologies. I was actually going to just say that I assume this report is going to go through, but I feel I can't support it. So while it'll go through, it wouldn't be with my support.
Well, you can.
I'm not intending to bring an amendment. I just wanted to publicly say that.
Okay, that's right. That's fine.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, for clarity, is Councillor Salmond wishing his dissent to be recorded? That will be the only way we will be able to minute.
Yes, please, Mr. McCaskill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, we've got the recommendations in front of you. 1 is note, 2 approve, and 3 agree. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
I record my dissent as well to that, please.
Yes, you certainly can, Councillor Stewart.
And mine.
And Councillor Sturrock. And may I just say the work of the MOG, and I would also like to thank Councillor Boyd, for being the chair of that MOG. Can we have that recorded, please? Okay, agenda item 11.
Convener, could we just pause a moment while the IT host allow Councillors Duff and Boyd back into the meeting?
Certainly.
Thank you.
And that's them both back in now.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 11, recommendation to pass resolution, sex shop. You've got the recommendations in front of you. Are there any questions? Councillor Fotheringham.
Just a comment, if I may.
A comment.
As chair of the civic licensing, yes, we discussed this last year at our meeting in October, and it was because of new provisions relating to entertainment venues, which came into force during April last year. And at the way things currently are, we don't have any of these shops or venues in Angus, but the way things currently are, they can open up and they don't have to be licensed. So we would ask the council if they would please pass a resolution which will come into effect a year from now and will allow us, should we have any applications for such venues, to license them and condition them. So I'd ask the council if they would pass the resolution, please. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. Is there any further comments? No. Okay, you've got the recommendations: 1 note, 2 note, 3 note, and 4 pass. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to 12. Recommendation to pass a resolution. Sexual entertainment venue licenses. You've got the recommendations in front of you. Are there any questions on this one? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Could I ask Mrs. Buchanan? When we've had this civic licensing, on both occasions, I have raised the fact that if they have a sexual entertainment venue and lap dancing, whatever, and I've seen them before, can we bring in now, or do we have to do it as part of the conditions when we license, if we license, that there shall be no performances that are imitating underage performers? Because I know a lot of these venues down south, the girls start off dressed like schoolgirls. And, you know, we want to avoid that from square one. Can we put that in now, or do we have to do it when we get an application?
Councillor Moore, what I'll do is I'll arrange for that to be responded to you separately and take advice from the leader of the licensing team to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Any comments? No, we've got the recommendations, 1 note and 2 pass a resolution as contained within Appendix 2. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda 13 is report on independent care review for Scotland. The report's by Catherine Lindsay. You've got the recommendations. Have we got any questions? I've got Councillor Speed, but is it a comment, Councillor Speed?
Yeah.
A comment? Okay, right, on you go, Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. Certainly last or almost last on our agenda items, and certainly should not be least. I commend all those with lived experience who have contributed to the review, and in particular our children and young people with an Angus who have managed to find the strength and courage to participate, share their often harrowing journey and speak out on behalf of their peers in similar circumstances. I believe it's imperative today that we as a council fully pause and continue to reflect on the challenges and adverse experiences that many of our children and young people experience, and the lifelong impact that growing up in difficult home and circumstances or care can often have in all areas, such as health and well-being, and in turn education, social opportunity and employment. It's crucial that we give due attention and that we understand, support and adequately resource our teams and partners that directly support our children and families, and that we strive to ensure our children and young people are enabled to stay at home whenever at all possible. This report should be hard-hitting and affect our conscience, knowing that we have children and young people who right this very minute are living within Angus with heavy burdens, trauma, pain and uncertainty. And it doesn't even bear thinking about the further impact that COVID-19 will have had. Many often grow up trying to navigate a complex system which is often under-resourced and overstretched, as well as experiencing a wider world that often lacks the understanding, love, care and compassion that is needed to help them to overcome and reach their full potential. In my role as social care spokesperson, my ask today is that we not only agree the recommendations, but that we work to ensure that we are proactive corporate parents and that our whole workforce, including our partners, become part of the change that's needed to help our care experienced children and young people to grow up and succeed. I would like to further make a plea to everyone within Angus, those living and working within our communities, from voluntary groups and organisations to businesses and employers throughout, to recognise the challenges and often exclusion and lack of connection that some of our children and young people experience, and to look to see what they can do to help make a difference, as we can't do this alone. As I've said many times, it often takes a whole community to raise a child. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Have we got any further comments? No. Okay, the recommendations: 1 note, 2 note, 3 note, and 4. Direct the Director of Children, Families and Justice to bring a report on service-specific implications following consideration of the findings of the Angus Integrated Children's Services Group and associated partnerships. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, agenda item 14 is the statutory review of polling places and polling districts, and the report is by Margot Williamson, our Chief Executive. You've got the recommendations. Are there any questions? Okay, we've got Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you. It was just, I thank you for this report. I do know that there is one polling station that isn't accessible. Could we just have a little bit of feedback on that for clarity, and what this means to constituents in that area, and how they are able to participate in voting, who might need access that's not there?
Margot?
Yeah, I can pick up on that myself with Councillor Speed later around that particular polling station.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Yes, it was 2 questions. The first question was, are we confident in our ability to run a COVID secure election should there be a requirement for by-elections, which I know are coming up in the northeast, but should that be required in Angus, and obviously with the Scottish elections next year? And the second question was on 4.3.2. It states that no significant changes in polling district electorates. I'm just wondering, obviously with the Scottish Government's extension of the franchise to prisoners, refugees and foreign nationals, does that mean we expect there to be no significant impact from the extension of the franchise in Angus ahead of next year's?
Okay, through you, Leader, to answer these questions. And in terms of a COVID election, I'm anticipating that we will get further information from the Electoral Commission about how to run the election. In Angus, we have a significant number of polling stations to physically distance. But obviously we're waiting on final details about what that would look like, particularly in relation to the Scottish election next year. In relation to the second point, I don't see any significant issues related to that.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Davey?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Devine?
Yes, Convener. I'm just a bit disappointed that the Community Council of Forfar wasn't actually listened to in terms of the fact that we only have 4 polling stations within the town, and they're nearly all within walking distance of each other. And there are 1 or 2 places which could have been used and are accessible out with the town. We definitely, people are having to move, are having to walk into the town when there could be places much closer, and we surely want to make sure that as many people as possible are willing to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Margot, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on it. I mean, we look at every possibility of places to hold elections, and one of the biggest stipulations we've had in Angus for a long time is to avoid using schools to ensure that children have continuity in their education. So, you know, it's one of these things where we do actually consult, and we held a consultation last year around this, and this is the best options that we could come up with at this time. And it seemed by and large to be agreed with people who were consulted.
Okay, that answer your question, Councillor Devine?
Well, no, but because we weren't, there was no thought of using schools. There's just one, particularly one venue which could have been used and is accessible and is much more in one of our communities. And I think the Community Council put that forward, so I'm a bit, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Councillor Devine, I'm happy to pick up on that for a discussion for the future around which venue you're talking about.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles.
It's a comment rather than a question. Are you ready for them yet?
Is Councillor Braze, have you got a question?
Yes, I do. On the subject of closing schools to make way for polling, I don't like that either. Education is so important. I wondered if any thought had been given to a possible use of mobile polling stations that could be used in rural areas where schools are having to be closed because there's no alternative polling place.
Through you, Leader, there's strict guidance about what we can do in terms of setting up polling stations and what facilities have got to be made available to people, both administering the poll and also people attending. And you know, over the years of doing elections, these have been refined by Angus in order to make sure that as many people have access to a polling station. So I'm really not sure where a mobile polling station would be beneficial as opposed to using some of the church halls and village halls that we currently use.
Okay, thank you. Just a wee comment as well. The crickety in Brechin seemed to work well as an alternative to Andover, but I have had some concerns, or they've been expressed to me, about the fact that Damacre isn't there anymore to use as a polling station, and it means a fair old hike to the Mechanics Hall. That's for another time though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles, you've got a comment?
Yes, it was basically on that schools, and it was a welcome the fact that Andover School is no longer to be required, and the crickety has been used. And I'm not aware of any other school in Angus, in the Brechin area that the school is used. We've managed to get other venues in every instance, so very pleased to see all that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durno.
Just going forward with COVID, etc., is it not time we maybe thought about putting a motion to the Electoral Commission suggesting that we should all just be doing postal votes from now on? And that would save having to pay council employees to stay there from like 7 in the morning until 10 at night and get paid quite a lot of money for doing so. That would save the council a wee bit of money, and then everybody would be postal voting, and it would save a big lot of hassle all the way around.
Well, if you want to put that motion in, Councillor Durno, off your pop.
I think I will.
Councillor Durno, can I also say that the people who actually man the polling stations are, you know, very varied. They're not all council employees by any manner of means, right. And can I assure you they are not well paid.
Okay.
Well, I'll not be standing for that job when I step down then. Okay, right, you've got the recommendations, 1 agree, 2 note and 3 note. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, right, can I just thank you all for your participation today.
Councillor Fairweather.
Yes.
Fairweather, could I just say that we've heard that unfortunately there